And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the council budget meeting for Wednesday, November the 3rd, 2021. We will begin with the playing of O Canada.
Does this mean Councillor or the chair is going to sing "O Canada"? I think that's the protocol now.
Happily, Mr. Mayor. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. You people are too kind. I had to do that once at an Ice Dogs game in the preseason where the audio system conked all the way out and the poor girl on the ice didn't know what to do, and so I started singing. And amazingly enough, the other 3,000 people in the Jack sang along with me, which was much better, and I didn't feel like everybody heard my voice, which was different from that time where everybody heard my voice. So I apologize to anybody at home whose ears are bleeding at this time. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't had nerves like that in a long time. I was afraid I was gonna forget the words or something. All right, let's bring it back to a little bit of seriousness. We begin our meeting today by taking time to acknowledge that the land on which we live and gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. Over the last several months, we as a community have tried to come to grips with the genocide that was perpetrated on the peoples that are indigenous to Canada by our federal government. While these lands are covered by multiple treaties between the Crown and those nations, those treaties have long been violated, if not completely ignored. These treaties where we live and work are covered by these territories where we live and work are covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. This was a treaty originally agreed to by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and Mississauga peoples, and European settlers brought into the agreement through the Treaty of Niagara. The purpose of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement is to ensure we all recognize the fact that we all have a responsibility to ensure the Dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability. So we'll begin this evening with the chair's report, and my report is not a long one. I want to remind council amendments to the capital budget. We will be asking for those today with a deadline of looking to Ms. Douglas tomorrow at noon. So if you do have amendments for the capital budget, you can bring them forward tonight, or you can forward them to the treasurer's office by tomorrow at noon so that they are able to be sorted and put into a format that we can all read, and we're able to give equal weight to all capital budget amendments and discuss them and understand them all at one time. With respect to the operating budget, the deadline for amendments is, Ms. Douglas? It's not before the next meeting, is it? No, it's not before the next meeting. So we will make sure that we get that date for everybody as a reminder of when amendments for the operating budget can come forward, or the deadline for it, so that we can have them all in one place before we move on. I see Councillor Garcia's got his hand up, so if it's related to anything I've mentioned, Councillor Garcia, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, when you say that capital budget amendments have to be in by tomorrow, I do have that motion on the Maysfield stairs, which was referred, and now I understand it's coming up at the November 8th budget meeting. So I just want to make sure that that's not lost in the shuffle. Do I need to submit an amendment in advance of the motion, or?
No, and the treasurer is indicating to me that is well understood. There's no need to forward that again as an amendment. It's already understood.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, so with that, I will move on to the adoption of the agenda, and I will look to the deputy clerk for any amendments to the agenda this evening.
There are two amendments to tonight's agenda. The first is John Koshti and Chris Richard have registered as delegates regarding agenda item 8.6, the draft 2022 capital budget. And then the second item is that the Niagara District Airport has revised its presentation and budget submission. A revised version is available for council through SugarSync folder and will be published for the public tomorrow.
Thank you, Ms. Deputy Clerk. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? All right, seeing no raised hands for the motion to adopt the agenda, can I have a motion from Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Garcia? All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, that is carried unanimously. There are no minutes to adopt this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? All right, seeing none, just a reminder, if you do have a declaration at any point, you do also need to submit that by written statement to the deputy clerk and council coordinator via email. So moving on to item 5, we have a motion that council approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items brought forward for discussion. And moving the consent agenda, can I have a mover for that? Councillor Littleton. Councillor Kushner? Okay, Councillor Kushner, did you have a question? Oh, no, okay. Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Just in terms of, I don't want to lift anything. I just want to draw people's attention to the grant application. So over $7 million has been raised through grant funding. And for the public realm, that represents about 7% increase in taxes if we didn't get these grant opportunities. It would be either reduction in what we've been able to do, or we would have to increase taxes by a commensurate amount. So I think it's helpful through the chair for the community to see that. And the only question I would have is in future reporting, if it's possible, to have some comparators with other municipalities. Are we, top of the line in securing grants federally and provincially? Are we in the middle of the road? Where are we on that? It would help us maybe ask some further questions about what more could we do, or where could we either improve, or where are we best in practice when it comes to securing funds. So I do want to take the time to say thank you to the federal and provincial counterparts for their investments to date, as it clearly has made a difference when you look at the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I believe that direction has been taken by finance staff about comparators in the future. I will also draw attention just to item 6.2 for the public's sake. I know council has read it, but reflecting the recent inflation increases, as we saw in our budget reporting at the last meeting, we had experienced 4.1% inflation. That rose to 4.4% in September, and reports today in the Financial Post that we could be looking at 5%, as high as 5% inflation this month, as forecast by the Bank of Canada. So I think that's something important that we want to make sure the community understands, that we are going through, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but definitely for the first time since 2003, inflation rates, which are very out of the norm with what we've experienced over the last 18 years. And that does translate to the costs associated with running the city as well. So just something I wanted to draw attention to was that rising inflation rate. And I do appreciate staff putting together the memo under the correspondence today as well. So I'll now look to the Deputy Clerk to call the recorded vote.
Today's consent agenda includes item 6.1, report from the Office of the CIO, providing an update on the 2021 grant applications, and item 6.2, legal and clerk services, council budget correspondence. Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes,
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson. Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
And Councillor Williamson. He's having some technical difficulties. We'll help him out. And Chair Cisco.
No, yes, yes, thank you.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Deputy Clerk, I'm here.
Oh, yes,
Here we
Councillor
go.
Sorrento is here as well.
And is that a yes?
That's a yes, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will move on to item 7. Actually, no, we won't. There are no presentations this evening, which is ironic, given that there are multiple presentations this evening, but nothing under the presentation heading. So instead, we will move on to item 8.1, St. Catharines Public Library 2022 budget presentation. And I will now call on Ken Sue, the Chief Executive Officer, and Karen Smith-Curtis, the Business Administrator, to present the Public Library's proposed 2022 budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Thanks for having us here tonight. So Carrie and I will be presenting the library's 2022 budget. So I'm wondering if the clerk's office is going to share the slides on our behalf.
I just want to confirm, can the councillors see the slides?
No.
No, Deputy Clerk.
Okay, thank you. One moment.
I'll ask everybody to hold for a moment while we try to make sure that this is shared appropriately. And we are back, and my apologies. It's the joy of 21st century technology in 2021. Sometimes things don't do what they want to do. But I will once again turn it over to Mr. Sue and Ms. Curtis Smith for your presentation from the Library Board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well said. I think sometimes technology when it works perfect, but I guess when it doesn't, sometimes it's frustrating. So thanks for having us here tonight. Karen and I will be presenting the library's 2022 budget to you, and we are happy to answer any questions afterwards. So next slide, please. And so here are the agenda for tonight, and I will be speaking to our 2021 accomplishments and what the library is planning to do in 2022. And then I will pass it on to Karen, who will focus on the draft budget. Next slide, please. So as we all know, we have continued to deal with issues caused by the pandemic this year. So the library was actually closed in January and February, briefly reopened for a month in March, and then closed again from April to the beginning of July. And then we opened on July the 5th after that. But the library actually has had a very busy year. We have noticed substantial growth in electronic circulation, program attendance, including our summer reading club, and also library hours have been increased, as I reported to council before. We now open on Mondays. So when we compare ourselves to the year before, or even in 2019, all locations now open on Mondays, except I think for Dalhousie. So we also have added more items to our collection, particularly non-traditional items, such as telescope kits, sport equipment, and park passes. And also to encourage the public to use the library and remove barriers. The library board approved to eliminate fines for seniors, teens, and children, and hopefully we can expand this initiative to include all customers soon. We also restructured the library team to streamline our operations and enhance customer experience by offering one-stop shopping to meet their needs. Given the financial challenges, I know the mayor mentioned earlier in terms of some grants the city received, the library has also proactively looked for external funding opportunities. So in this year, library staff were able to secure several grants to allow us to introduce new services and programs such as hotspots, telescope kits, and a mobile library that will soon be available to the community. On the capital project side, the library was able to replace its elevator and dumbwaiter as well as its roof. We are working on replacing the HVAC system, which is end of life. We are also moving forward to renovate the central library and have hired an architect to prepare preliminary conceptual and architectural designs. So that leads to the library's 2022 plan. Next slide, please. So looking forward to 2022, I hope we will eventually get out of the pandemic and we'll be able to focus on some projects that are long overdue. So we are currently developing a new brand that will help the library raise its profile in the community. This new brand will be rolled out in 2022 in conjunction with some activities such as membership campaign, revamped newsletter, and also enhanced customer service standard. The HVAC system I mentioned earlier is scheduled to be replaced, and the new one will be installed in probably April, May 2022. We will also work with the architect I mentioned before to develop and finalize conceptual and architectural design for the central library. And at the same time, the library will work with the city to determine the ideal location for the Merit branch, as I think mentioned last year in the budget presentation. And so, finally, the library will continue to find internal efficiency of its operations, diversify its collections, and enhance our community outreach and partnership. So now I'm going to turn it over to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. If I could have the next slide up, please. Thank you. So this slide shows our proposed operating budget for 2022. This budget was approved by the Board of Directors of the library in September at the September 2021 meeting. You will note that in order to present a balanced budget, our budget in 2022 is actually smaller than our budget in 2021, unfortunately. The 2021 budget was built on receipt of federal funding, which has been subject to a review and therefore still questionable, and we have not included it in 2022, lowering that number significantly. The 2022 budget is also built upon a 3.5% increase in funding from the city after no increase in city funding was requested in 2021, sorry. And also the 2022 budget is built on miscellaneous revenues that we expect to decline again next year as we expand the fine-free program and experience lower operating revenues from volumes because of the pandemic, etc., and also due to lower interest rates, which will keep our interest income quite low. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. As with any budget, there's always some opportunities and pressures in every budget. So in the 2022 budget, we did include the opportunity of expanding our fine-free initiative, which conversely does reduce our miscellaneous income. But it is the standard in most libraries these days to expand the fine-free initiative. And so we would like to be able to do that next year. We also have included more fine-tuning on our materials budget. Materials is the heart and soul of the library, to be honest. And our peers on average spend about 11.5% of their total budget on the materials, the collection, as it were. St. Catharines has normally spent about 13, well, it was higher, but we are now spending about 13.5% of our budget on the collection, which allows us the opportunity to refine that spending a little bit more. So we're trying to move more in line with our peers on that line. We do also have quite a few obligations as required by most collective agreements. Our collective agreement is up at the end of 2021. So we've put our best guess in for 2022 increases. And I will mention, actually, just based on recent news, we did not factor in a $15 minimum wage as now proposed by the provincial government as of yesterday. So that will challenge our budget a little bit further. On the plus side, we did successfully negotiate a much better rate at our Merritt branch location than we anticipated for 2021 and through to 2024. So that's good news. And we have also included significant capital improvements that are needed, as outlined in a condition assessment report we had done of the Central Library in 2019. The roof, as Kent mentioned, is well underway. We expect the roof to be completed in about 2 weeks' time. And we are in the process of securing the HVAC equipment, and we will soon be issuing an RFP related to the installation of that equipment, which, as Ken mentioned, we hope to have completed by spring of 2022. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the intent of this slide is really to establish some context related to the municipal contribution. In 2021, the library funding remained unchanged from 2020. This year we are asking for a 3.5% increase, which brings the increase over the last 4 or 5 years to 1.4% for the library, which is pretty modest overall. The City of St. Catharines funds us at the average of about $42.65 per citizen of the city. Our peer libraries are actually funded at $47.67 per citizen. So as a point of comparison, if we had been funded at the average of our peers, we would have another $668,000 in our budget. Niagara Falls actually provides closer to $53 per citizen to their library. So I think our request of 3.5% fits well with where our peers are. So thank you very much. That's the end of our presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sue and Ms. Smith Curtis, for your presentation. Do any members of council have questions? I believe I saw Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the presenters. I just have a question about the federal funding. Was it the wage subsidy? And do you expect that some of it will have to be paid back? Has there been a decision on that?
And Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. So yes, so we did receive a letter from Canada Revenue Agency. They didn't really ask for all the money be paid back. What they asked initially was they determined, I think, period 9, the library was not eligible for that. And then later on, I think in August, I cannot remember the exact date, we got another letter from them, asked partial refund, basically return the funding. So what the library did was we had discussed with the city and our auditor. So we did pay all the money back because if we don't, if they further determine the library is not eligible for the funding, they will charge additional interest. So what we did was we gave the money back, but at the same time, in June, the library did file an appeal to CRA. So we haven't heard anything in terms of our appeal. So it's still pending.
Thank you. And then I have one more question. Your HVAC project, is this related to COVID and a project for improved ventilation, or is it just because of aging infrastructure?
Our HVAC system is about 20 years old, so it is pretty much end of life. So it is not specifically a pandemic project, no. It was identified in 2019 as part of our condition assessment report.
Okay, there is federal funding for indoor ventilation. Have you looked at the new, well, it's not that new, but the funding announcement, I do think it's COVID funding, but it's for improved ventilation improvements. Will you look at that and potentially apply for that?
We can look at it, yes, and we'll see if we can take advantage of that, yes. I don't know the answer tonight, of course.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Phillips, followed by Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. You've done a great job in improving your capital expenditure projects. The money that you've had to spend on that, and with the HVAC coming up, including the roof and the elevator, did you have to debenture, or are you going to have to debenture any of that, or did you have reserves to cover all those projects?
So no, we have not done any debenturing at all. Actually, the funding for these substantial infrastructure projects come from the capital reserve of the library that has been noticed by council over the last few years, and we are actually at the position that we are spending most of those reserve dollars over the next few years to upgrade the library.
Thank you. That's great news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips, and yes, that is great news. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. On the overall budget, you show a projected 3.5% increase in the city's contribution, which is quite large, but I know you point out that you didn't increase it at all last year. But the comparison that you show is 2022 budget to 2021 budget. We are in November. Is that 2021 budget close to what you see the year ending, your forecast, or would there be a change for that?
We shared with city staff projection to the end of the year at the end of September. We project those things quarterly, and that projected it to the end of the year, and we would be on budget at the end of the year is what we had informed the city staff of.
So pretty well the same number that you show as budget, okay. And my second question is regarding the renovations. Would those renovations alter or change the outside look of the library and the facade of the building?
Sorry, Councillor Garcia, I apologize. I would like to clarify my earlier statement about the end of the year projection. What we did not include in the end of the year projection was the federal funding, of course, which for 2021 was $300,000, but we still plan to run a balanced budget in 2021 because we were closed for periods of time due to the pandemic and have spent less on salaries. The federal funding and the lower salaries will offset each other, so it's a little bit different than the 2021 budget you're looking at, but we will be on budget at the end of the year. In terms of the renovation of the Central Library, we are focusing on the inside, but of course we'll look for opportunities to improve the presence of the Central Library in the downtown core. It is hidden a little bit away, and I think there is an opportunity to make it stand out a little bit more to attract more customers into the library. But we will of course be focusing mainly on the inside, but look for those opportunities if they present themselves.
Thank you for that. I raised that issue because I was contacted by the widow of the architect who designed that building, who believes it's quite attractive and a classic, and she was concerned that maybe we were going to make significant changes to the outdoor look of it. So.
No, I think you are right. I do believe it's an iconic building in downtown St. Catharines, but I just think there may be an opportunity to draw more attention to it with very careful and strategic design changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, first question to Ken is about the recent wage increase, with the minimum wage increasing. Would this affect the library at all?
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, yes, because the library does have, I think right now, roughly about 10 staff members. Mainly they are all student pages or adult pages, so they are kind of paid at minimum wage. So once the minimum wage, the new one starts on January 1, 2022, that will have an impact on our budget. And when we took our budget to the board, that was before the announcement, so it was not included in our draft budget.
I don't know if it's too early to estimate, but would it have a large impact at all, or do you think it's something that's going to be just able to be absorbed with the increase that you're asking for?
Mr. Chair, through to the councillor, I would probably defer this to Karen. I don't know if she has a number in mind.
I think the minimum wage increase, I actually looked at it very quickly because it just came out yesterday, but I believe it'll cost us about $15,000 more next year. And it would be our intent to adjust our budget accordingly and absorb it within the numbers that you see tonight.
Okay, a comment if I could just make, Mr. Chair. I just, as council knows, I'm one of the council reps on the board with Councillor Williamson, and I'm just so happy and proud of the work that's done at the library. Always new initiatives. There's many more members that have joined the library. Last year in a pandemic, a lot of people turned to the library, and the library was there, coming up with curbside service, new programs, telescopes being lent out, and even today, a new partnership with the community with free libraries. So for those who don't know, the library is now offering some of its discarded books to folks in our community who have these free libraries if they want to replenish them or just freshen up their offerings. And I just want to commend Ken and Karen and your staff for always being innovative and looking for the positives and ways to move the library forward. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Karen and to Ken. I'm not going to be repetitive of my fellow councillor, who's my colleague on the library board, Councillor Littleton, who said it well. I guess the only thing she might have missed is the fact, of course, that we have expanded hours of service and open on Mondays downtown, which has been good. This is a law ball question. When is the last time the provincial government has upped their transfers or grants to libraries? I don't believe it's been in my long tenure on the library during that period.
I believe it was about 29 years ago. The Kathleen Wynne government had proposed changes to the library funding from the provincial government, but unfortunately she was defeated before that got into place. So it has not changed in about 28 years or so, I believe.
So through 3 different political establishments at Queen's Park, we haven't had an increase in the provincial funding. That puts definitely more pressure onto the municipalities, and it's creates a bit of extra stress. So anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. And I think that's actually an important point to make. And Councillor Williamson said it exceptionally well through three different governments. We've seen no increases, and that can only be frustrating. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, seeing none, I just wanted to make a few comments. I appreciated the presentation and specifically the slideshow or the slide specific to the accomplishments over the last year, because a number of them really sort of hit home with me. The e-circulation and the other electronic resources I think have been very well received by the community. I know in my household there are a number of apps that we use on a very regular basis. I will admit that I have fallen in love with audiobooks, and Cloud Library and Hoopla are absolutely fantastic. So I strongly suggest to members of the community who want to broaden their knowledge base or just listen to good science fiction, both of those apps have excellent resources on them. I want to thank you both for making Mondays possible. I made a comment on Twitter 4 or 5 years ago about how I would love to see the library open on Mondays, and it was great to see that come to fruition. I was actually attacked by a former regional councillor who couldn't understand why the budget committee chair was hoping to see libraries open on Mondays, and I thought that was rather strange, but I'm thrilled that you were able to make that happen. Your new collections, as Councillor Littleton pointed out, are phenomenal, and reading about the telescope program this summer warmed this physics teacher's heart to its very core. So thank you for that, and I love that that initiative has been taken up by the community so well. Your fine-free plans for seniors and teenagers and kids is also very much welcomed by a father whose teenage son and small children love the library, love books, and forget when things are due on a regular basis. So thank you for that. And I do want to echo the comments that Councillor Phillips made. I was glad to see that those infrastructure projects are coming and that capital reserve is drawing down and those funds are being used appropriately. So thank you for that. Before we get to the vote, I do have one request. On the last slide, there was a graph, and I'm hoping that maybe we can have that graph altered before the slideshow is put into the minutes. Simply because in looking at the graph, the way it appears, it looks like council had a very high or had approved a very high contribution to the library and then slashed it in half, and it was very slowly inching its way up. And the only reason I draw attention to this is that the x-axis is running in the wrong direction. So it's running from the current year to 2016. And the y-axis is listing from 5 million to 6 million, which makes the change very, very drastic. And anybody who's looking at this briefly might misunderstand the graph. So I'm hoping, and maybe this is just a request, that we could have that graph with the x-axis reversed to be an appropriate time order, and that the y-axis be changed from starting at 5 million to starting at 0, just to show the relative actual increases and decreases, if that was possible.
I am happy to make those changes to the graph. No problem.
Sincerely appreciate that. And as I said, kudos. It's been a very difficult time, and I give a great deal of credit to the library leadership for reminding the community and making accessible to the community a service that maybe some folks had overlooked in the past. But I think it's important that the St. Catharines Public Library continue to be very much at the center of our community and our community life. So with that, can I have a mover to receive the presentation? Councillor Littleton, can I have a seconder on that? Councillor Williamson. The council received the presentation from the St. Catharines Public Library regarding the library's proposed 2022 budget. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Then that carries unanimously. And may I have a councillor who would like to move that the proposed 2022 budget for the library be included in the draft 2022 operating budget for consideration? Councillor Littleton again, and seconded by Councillor Williamson. I always like to look at the folks who sit on those committees for the moving and the seconding. That the proposed 2022 budget presented by the library be included in the draft 2022 operating budget for consideration. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? All right, then, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Mayor Senzik?
Yes.
Councillor Chair Cisco?
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, and once again, Ms. Smith-Curtis and Mr. Sue, thank you very much for the presentation. I will now move on to St. Catharines Transit Commission in their traditional spot, following up after the library, which for whatever reason has been the way things have been for every one of my 11 years on council. And I will look to Colin Briggs, the chair, Graham Morrison, the general manager, and Brad Griffin, the manager of finance and administration, who are now in attendance. Mr. Briggs, if you'd like to present the Transit Commission's proposed 2022 budget.
Certainly. Next slide. Hello? Hello? We having technical problems again?
No, Mr. Briggs, we can hear you. We're
Okay,
just...
all right, next slide, please. This is the agenda that we're going to speak about this evening, starting with 2021 review, service levels, 22 proposed budget, budget highlights, and future challenges. Next slide. On behalf of the Commission, I'd like to thank all our employees who kept our transit system running safely throughout the pandemic and continue to do so. Next slide. Ongoing COVID response, as Council is aware, transit is defined as an essential service provincially. Our employees have risen to the challenge. Ridership has dropped as much as 85% from pre-pandemic levels. We've seen a steady increase, but we're currently down 55%. Next slide. This is one of our successes, mobile ticketing. I won't go into great details on it, but it's been well received by the public. It's certainly allowed with touch-free transfer of money to the organization. But we'll go on to the next slide. The highlights of our ICAIP funded capital projects is we purchased 12 new conventional buses, 5 new paratransit buses, and we're currently working on renovations for improving accessibility to our facilities. Next slide. During 2021, we launched a in-house on-demand transit pilot project, which has benefits to the people that are not served by conventional transit currently. Next slide. Just to remind Council, we currently operate our routes 18 hours a day, Monday to Saturday, 12 hours on Sunday. We provide contracted services to the region, to the City of Thorold and BUSU, Brock University Student Union. We maintain a fleet of 75 accessible conventional buses and 13 paratransit buses. Next slide. We did consider during our budget deliberations for 2022 service improvements, but given the pandemic situation, we're deferring consideration of that until 2023. The next slide. We have done a fair amount of work, and we've done a lot of reviews of trying to electrify our fleet, and we're currently developing a roadmap of how we can do this in the future. Next slide. Getting to the details of our budget request this year, our net operating costs are up about 1.8%, and then after we take into consideration the city's requirement to debenture our capital requirements and our identified COVID cleaning, and we're expecting from GO that there's going to be some additional service requirements during this 2022. So that brings our budget up from 1.8% to 2%. We are anticipating lower safe restart funding for 2022, and our surpluses dropped from the previous year. So our net request from the city is all 2.98%, up $407,000. Next slide. Again, we still have impacts of the ridership. That's identified in the first line. Most of these things I've talked about. The weekly GO increase we're anticipating at some point this year. They don't give us much notice, so we have to budget for it. If they don't actually do the improvement, we won't spend the money, obviously. And again, there's been a reduction in the amount of COVID-related supplies we've expended this year, or anticipating to expend this year, and there's a reduction in the restart funding. And as you're aware, the city doesn't allow us to carry over surpluses. It doesn't allow us to do reserves. So any surpluses that we achieve in the previous year are immediately offset against the budget request of the Transit Commission. Next slide. Again, a traditional pie diagram that shows you where our expenditures are. We're a labor-intensive business, as you're well aware. And, the second biggest expense is, fueling and providing the means of moving the buses down the road. Next slide. Our capital budget requirements or requests are $12.3 million. We anticipate, and we do already have indications of acceptance from the ICIP program from the federal or provincial. Our gas taxes are our next offset, which is down from previous years. So our net capital requirement is slightly over $1 million, or about under 10% of the capital requirements of the Transit Commission. So the city is being requested for under 10% of what the capital requirements are for the Transit Commission. And there is no major capital budget in our transit operating budget. It's all done through a request for debentures issued by the city. Next slide. Again, this just gives a breakdown of the ICIP program. It's expected to go on for a number of years. What we don't know is what the budget or the program requirements may be they may change what's eligible and what's not. Again, I mentioned our provincial gas tax money is down 25%. We expect that gas tax money will decrease each year from this point on. Next slide. This, I guess, is a graphic or a chart that shows our ridership and the impact that it had during the pandemic. And as you can see, it dipped down in the beginning of 2021 because we were still in lockdown. It has recovered, and we're certainly thankful that the university went back into in-class sessions this year. So now we're seeing the ridership recovering, but we're certainly not back up to pre-pandemic levels. Next slide. The future challenges, this is one we wanted to emphasize is, we do have a surplus that we've applied against the operating budget for this year. It is less than what we had in the previous year. And if we don't have any similar surplus for the 2023 budget, the impact would be about 18%. a lot of our surplus this year was generated through favorable diesel prices. We no longer have those, as you can see by what you're paying at the pumps. The pressure on fuel prices has been significant, and the Transit Commission, who purchases a lot of diesel fuel, is going to feel it in this year's budget. And we have given what we consider a reasonable estimate of what diesel prices are going to be for 2023. And again, our reliance on external capital funding, 90% of our funding is coming from other levels of government. You know, there is indications of programs, the ICIP program will continue. We just don't know if there may be a redefinement of what's eligible and what's not. Obviously, you know, ongoing impact of COVID for our operations. And that is our budget presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Briggs. I'm now looking to the members of council for any questions or comments related to the St. Catharines Transit Commission 2022 budget presentation. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. For you to Transit Commission friends. The provincial gas tax down to over $2 million, and then Mr. Briggs, I didn't know if you said that you're anticipating increases in the provincial gas tax or decrease in provincial gas tax.
Decreases.
D as in dog?
It's down. Yeah.
Down. Oh, negative. And why do we expect that?
Well, I think what we saw, and Grant can jump in later, but we saw the decrease from this year because everybody stayed at home and was locked down, so there was less people filling up their tanks to go to work, right? It was one of the reasons. And it's just that there's been a movement, you know, with the carbon tax, there's been a movement to less reliance on fossil fuels as a source of propellants for vehicles. So that's why we think it's going to start decreasing. So we don't think that it's going up. If anything, it may stabilize for a period of time, but definitely over time it's going down.
Okay, well, if one of our overarching objectives is to get fewer people in, you know, individual personal passenger vehicles and onto public transit, that's going to obviously mitigate against it. And so I don't know, and I guess there's a provincial election next June, so this is I guess this will be an issue that will play out in that election. So thank you. And yeah, the prospect of an 18% increase is quite daunting. And we know that the success of public transit is the coverage of the routes plus the frequency of the routes. And I caught, I think, on one of the slides, maybe on Scott Street, that there is a proposal, or maybe if you could just elaborate on, is there an expansion of service on that route?
Sure, that was one of the recommendations in the city's transportation master plan, and that was to connect the Scott Street to the bus terminal. Right now, it just does a loop in that area, and it doesn't connect it. So it's a lower ridership route because it's disconnected from everywhere else. So people will make a choice of a different route if they can. So the plan is to connect that to the terminal, and we're exploring our options as to the best way to do that. But that would be a 2023 initiative at this point.
And I just one last question, and that is the crosstown route that connects the hospital all the way across to the museum. How has that worked out?
It's fared fairly well. It was actually one of our higher ridership routes throughout the pandemic, just because it was connecting, you know, the hospital and shopping areas. So it did pretty well. And we connected that to the bus terminal, and that saw ridership grow there as well. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Director Morrison. Does transit buy the buses in conjunction with Metrolinx to save money?
Yes, we buy through what's called the Transit Procurement Initiative. So we join that. We pay a participation fee, and they do all the RFP work, and they take advantage of bulk buying. So we're with, I believe it's a 22 or 23 other transit systems that buy buses that way.
So through the chair to you, Director, then we are realizing some kind of a savings then. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Through the chair to Director Morrison, now will the regional transit impact our budget at all? Should it go through to regionalize the bus services? Will that have any impact on this budget or no?
We don't have any impact on this budget because no change will be planned until 2023.
Right, okay. A couple of more questions, please. Paratransit. Any updates that you can provide us with regard to paratransit, Director Morrison? I don't know, different sources of revenue or just comments. Is it easier to book online? Anything to add?
Yeah, we've implemented a booking system through, it's called Rideco. So you book it similar to the way you book an Uber. So it's a little more user friendly, especially if you're booking for, an elderly parent or something like that. It makes it, you don't have to sit and wait on the phone anymore to book rides. So it's a little more customer friendly.
Okay, great. And one final question, Chair, to I guess maybe Chair Briggs and or Director Morrison. So you show on the slide that you still get 90% of our funding from the federal and provincial government, correct?
For capital.
Capital, yeah.
Oh, just for capital, eh? Okay, so that's still a lot of money. So the orders of government are ponying up. Is that a fair statement?
For sure it is, yes.
And just one through the chair to Chair Briggs. You mentioned something about the carbon tax. Now, is that the federal carbon tax, Chair, and is that impacting operations negatively? Can you just explain what you meant by that, please?
No, I think it's going to be a negative impact on the gas tax rebates, is that the higher the price point goes for gas at the pumps, the less people are going to try and use or get more fuel efficient cars, and that'll translate down to less gas tax rebates for us.
And Chair, one final question. I'll just speed off this. Are we looking at electric buses for the future?
Yes,
Yep.
We're in the middle of a second phase of an electrification study right now with, and we're partnered with Electra and a couple other consultants to do that. So we've been through phase one to look at the feasibility. Now they're doing a lot more of the actual, work as to infrastructure and that kind of piece. And we should have that complete by probably late spring. So, and then there'd be a phase three piece. So there's a potential we could be closing in on that in 2023 sometime.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. And I will actually just build off of Councillor Sorrento's last question there. Maybe Mr. Morrison, you can illuminate my thinking on this. With respect to the electrification, I know, and it's been a few years since I was on the Transit Commission, but when I was last on the Commission in 2018, electric buses were looking somewhere in the 1 million plus range for purchase. Has the price come down over the last 3 years, or is the capital cost on an electric bus still in that $1 million range? And how does that compare to the 40-footer diesels that we're currently purchasing?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, I think it's still in that $1 million range, and it's a conventional diesel bus would be in the neighborhood of 750,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to ask that question about electric buses. So this will be a quick one. With Canada Summer Games coming up in August, are we considering at all running a shuttle service from the downtown terminal up to Canada Summer Games Place?
Yeah, we haven't established anything yet, but we're working with Canada Summer Games staff through our regional working group to see what we could do there. And we anticipate we'll have news on that, early in the new year.
Yeah, that'd be great, because that's, I think that's going to increase your ridership if we could do that, and again, cut down on our exhaust situation. And but hopefully that'll happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to both presenters, Mr. Briggs, you showed the slide ridership when you say that it's expected to remain low for a few years. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm just trying to get your thinking on what do you think will happen in the future? And I guess my question relates to people stop using transit both because they were working from home, but also because they were afraid to be in really close quarters. Would this be a structural change where we can assume that ridership will not only remain low but plateau at a lower level than it used to be, or do we think that it will eventually come back to what it used to be?
I'll look into the future. So even though I didn't take that class at university, but I think we're going to see recovery of the ridership. I think we've been negatively impacted by CERB and the extension of CERB in the beginning. With the rise in the minimum wage, the actively recruitment of restaurants and retailers, I think we're going to see some improvement. How long it takes to get back up to pre-pandemic ridership levels, that I can't predict. But I think we're going to see a steady rise back up, but it may take 2 or 3 years before we see it bounce back up to the levels we saw prior to the pandemic. And this is something that every transit property in Ontario is having the challenge to deal with. The TTC has been written up in the Star a few weeks ago about the challenge of trying to get the ridership back to the level. We have made inroads, to try and make the vehicle safe, so there's no concern about, contacting COVID through, taking the transit bus. We do have an active cleaning program, so I don't think that's the risk, but I think that the CERB, that's our kind of our ridership group, right at this point in time, is the people that are moving to the retail jobs and that. So I'm saying yes, I think it's going to get better. I just don't know how long it's going to take to get back up to the levels that we saw in 2019.
Councillor Garcia, you're muted.
Thank you for that, Mr. Briggs. It's encouraging. I would agree with you. I would expect that, like everything else, eventually we will get back to, quote, normal. You mentioned the TTC, and I read recently that they're having to cut down on routes and buses, GO buses, particularly because of, I guess that's GO Transit, but because of the vaccine mandates affecting staffing levels. Is our commission being affected by that at all in terms of staffing levels?
No, not at this point. Our vaccine policy is in place, and we've been able to manage around any situations there.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Littleton, followed by Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I think Councillor Kushner had put his hand up before, but it was a thumbs up. So if he'd like, he can go ahead of me.
Councillor Kushner.
The question I have is with respect to paratransit. With 13 buses, are we meeting the demand for service?
We're definitely meeting the demand at this point when, a lot of the programming has been shut down for the past 20 months. But we were meeting the demand before, so I think we're in a good spot with that. We added an extra 40 hours of service, I believe it was in the 2019 or 2020 budget. So I think we're in a good place for paratransit right now.
Okay, I'm under the impression that paratransit is used, before the pandemic to full capacity, which is not the case for the regular buses. How does the cost per user for paratransit compare with the cost per user for a conventional bus?
Cost per user for paratransit is, I might ask Brad Griffin if he knows that one. He's on the call as well.
Right.
It's higher.
It's considerably higher. Go ahead.
Hi, Councillor. I actually don't have that handy for 2021 or 2020, but it is considerably higher. I will say that, but I can get that information to you if you'd like.
No, that answer is fine. When I look at the ICIP approved projects, I see improvements to the bus stops and to the shelters of $1 million. That seems very high. Can you expand on that, please?
Yes, it would be. It's a lot of concrete work and actual shelter infrastructure. Larger shelters can, they can be $40,000-$50,000 pretty quickly. So as we try and expand to make the service more user friendly and accessible, then that money won't go as far as you would think.
Okay, and that's approved by the Canada Infrastructure Program. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Littleton, followed by Mayor Senzik.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just have a quick question, and I'm just going to apologize in case I've missed it. I've read the, the presentation and everything, but can you just let me know what is the ask for this year? What is the increase you're looking for, or the percentage?
It's 2.98%.
2.98. So this 18% then is something you're looking at perhaps next year if you don't get some funding that you're anticipating?
Yeah, if we don't get support from other levels of government and our ridership stays down and fuel prices stay high, it's kind of it's just making everyone aware that there is that scenario that could potentially happen.
And as council's aware, when we have a surplus, you get the money at the end of the year. If we have a deficit, you fund the deficit, but we don't get to carry over or accumulate a surplus. Our surplus again was $2 million that we're including in the budget from 2021. The half of it almost is from favorable diesel prices. Those don't exist anymore. So our surplus is likely dropping. We just don't know how much at this point in time.
Okay. So then my next question would be, if ridership stays down, which I mean, according to the chart, it seems like it would be down for a couple of years. Can you explain why it might be for a few years? I mean, we're opening back up, we're getting to capacity. What do you think is going on there?
I think it's just, I mean, it won't stay down to that degree. It will climb gradually. It just won't get to our 2019 levels for a couple of years, was what industry-wide is being anticipated. I think just people have found, more people are potentially work from home in hybrid situations, and have found other means to get places, and it just takes a bit of time to build back.
Okay. Are there other initiatives? Because we've already heard tonight, obviously we do want to encourage people to be using public transit. We have new developments that come on, and in the proposal sometimes they have reduced parking, for example, because they're in places of higher density, and the idea is that these folks would be using transit. Do you use any of those kinds of trends in your planning, or are there any kind of new initiatives that you think of to get new riders?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get new riders is more service, but we're trying to find, make the service better in the sense that we'll have, we've renovated the bus terminal to make it a better customer experience. We're adding shelters and shelter pads to make it easier to travel. And our fare technology, if everything goes according to plan, it'll make you can buy fares on your phone now. And the next phase of that will be to be able to just get on the bus and tap your debit or credit card to pay your fare. So we're trying to make it as convenient as possible as well. And I think that type of thing will go a long way too.
I think that's excellent. And my daughter started using the transit this summer to get to and from our house and to her job. And so, she did a great job, and well done with the transit. And so I think when I'm hearing those things like tap and everything to make it easier for the rider, that's well done. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor Littleton. Mayor Senzik.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And I want to scratch a bit more on the transit, the expectation of ridership. So the City of London, which has a somewhat similar sort of look to transit than say the TTC, they're up to 90% levels. They're up to 90% of where they were in 2019. So, Graham, can we maybe do some research on that and see why London, Ontario is at 90% of where they were in 2019, and we're at 55%, and sort of get some clarity on that?
Yeah, we can look into that for sure.
The other thing would be in terms of safety and building infrastructure. For what I've noted is that when I travel to other communities that are more integrated in their transit system and have more sort of a robust budget, you see the transit stops are lit. So I will speak from the perspective of a female. If right now it's 7 o'clock at night, I don't know one female that would feel secure standing at a bus stop in St. Catharines where the transit shelters don't even have any lights in them. So how do you approach that from an infrastructure point of view when you want to get more riders, but yet the ability for people to feel safe, well lit at a stop is being compromised?
Yeah, I guess that's something we can take into account when we start to look at our project for shelters and stops. We could analyze that. It isn't something we get any significant feedback on, but it is a great point. So we can incorporate that into our stop, rehabbing plans.
And I appreciate that. When I was in Waterloo, around the universities at least, they're lit so that at nighttime the students are standing inside the shelter, especially if it's raining or whatever, and they're inside the shelters, and it just has a sense that it's a little bit more safe. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. And we did have a call on our telephone town hall about Welland Avenue. So there's a new, I'm just looking for how you would address this from an infrastructure standpoint. There's a new medical facility, and it's a very technologically driven medical facility. It's GMNI on Welland Avenue. And an older woman who takes transit all the time, she gets dropped off on the other side of the road. That's the only stop. And for her to cross the 4 lanes of road, very challenging for her. And for her to actually cross at an intersection, she has to go either back to Grantham, and Bunting is way too far. So how would a transit user navigate something like that?
She'd be coming from the east end of the city, I would assume.
So they would what?
She would. I'm just assuming she's coming from the east end of the city if she's getting dropped off.
Yeah, she's getting dropped off on the RB side. I'll just use a restaurant side, the RB side.
No, that is a difficult one because the service can only go that one way unless she was to travel around to get to the other, to the other part of that route. That would be the only other option. And the other thing would be street crossing infrastructure, I guess, would be the key. That's an issue in transit everywhere, though.
So I just bring that up because it's an example of how we need to get more riders on the bus, but we have to be aware of creating more pedestrian safe spaces so that when people use the bus and they either getting to and fro or getting to their place, where that last 100 meters or 50 meters or whatever it may be is as safe as possible. And so it looks like we've got some work ahead of us as well as we build an integrated transit system to figure all this stuff out. So great budget, well done, and I just want to say thank you for what you've come in with.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do agree with the mayor with respect to safety at bus stops. I think perhaps a focus group of users might help inform safety and what it's like at getting on and off at various bus stops at various times. I want to commend you on the ticketing system on the phones, and my children started to use the bus as well. They're 11 and 13, and they went to camp in Port Dalhousie this summer and took the bus by themselves and got back, and they were able to use the transit app on their phones, and they've become transit riders. I just want to remind people that it only takes about 12 or 13 minutes to get to Port Dalhousie and go to the beach from downtown. So if you're frustrated by parking, it's really easy to get to the beach. So I just want to say that. My only question, it's a small question. I do see that your PPP supplies, and you've got cleaning in here. It's reduced from the year before, which makes sense. and when you say PPE, are you buying masks for the transit operators? And then in terms of cleaning, we've come to understand that COVID is mostly airborne. It's a confined space. I'm sure that some cleaning is necessary, but I'm wondering if you've taken a look at the latest science and kind of adjusted the cleaning. We certainly don't need to do the cleaning that we all thought we needed to do at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, we do buy masks for the operators, and yes, we've adjusted our cleaning protocols substantially from 2020 as well. So.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of testing, are you buying tests for the transit operators as well, the COVID tests?
No, they're required to test if they're required to produce their own test results twice a week.
Okay, thanks very much. No further questions.
All right, thank you, Councillor Porter. Any other comments or concerns? All right, seeing none, I will just make a few quick comments at the end. I wanted to commend Mr. Morrison specifically. I know for a number of years he's been helping to lead the charge locally with respect to electric buses, and I know the St. Catharines Transit Commission has been very involved with the studies that have been ongoing through CUDA and Opta and a number of other organizations. So kudos to them on that. I will echo the comments about the mobile ticketing. I think it's fantastic that it's moving forward. I've always been a big believer that the less friction we can have for users who want to use the system, the better, and the mobile ticketing is another step in that direction. My kids as well love to be on the bus, and so as they get older and are not quite old enough to be able to drive my car yet, it's good that they will have the bus there, and trying to make sure that that's a thing they understand. I do want to give a shout out to the initiative, ongoing initiative with respect to Ice Dogs games and the ability for Ice Dogs ticket holders to be able to get on the bus for free. That's a fantastic initiative, and hopefully some model like that can be used with respect to the Canada Summer Games. And then finally, again, to the senior management staff at St. Catharines Transit, their leadership with the Linking Niagara Working Group over the last year or two has been absolutely pivotal, and it is sincerely appreciated by me and everybody else working on that project. With that, can I have a mover to receive the presentation? Councillor Dodge and Mr. Mayor. All right. So we have a motion, but I see the mayor's hand up, and I wasn't sure if that was from earlier or if that was for now. So can we receive the presentation, or is it relating to the presentation, Mr. Mayor?
I just want to get some direction to the commission. My biggest frustration is, now that sports are back in place and the Performing Arts Center is back in place, is that if you went to the 4-pad, you wouldn't even know that we have a transit. So if we want to increase our ridership, I'm encouraging Graham needs to sit down with our city staff and figure out, how do we get advertising and prompting in our own facilities. We own the transit, we own our facilities. And yet, if you went to our transit, you went to any of our properties, the Burgoyne Arena, the library, you would have no idea that we have transit. So it's just a direction, Chair. I'm getting really frustrated by it. Okay, so there's the dog barking, so I'll leave it at that. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Luna. All right, to receive the presentation, all those in favor? And opposed? So that's carried. Can I have a councillor to move the proposed 2022 budget for transit to be included in the draft 2022 operating budget for consideration? Councillor Dodge, who is one of our transit commissioners, and a seconder. I can only see part of council, so I'm going to say Councillor Littleton, would you like to second this one? Because I can't see anybody else. Thank you so much. And the motion is that the proposed 2022 budget presented by the St. Catharines Transit Commission be included in the draft 2022 operating budget for consideration. And I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes, and if it means a lot to Councillor Phillips, he can second it.
Yes.
Councillor
Sorrento?
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
and Chair Cisco.
For my friends at Transit, yes.
And that's carried.
All right. And thank you to Councillor Littleton for being as magnanimous as she has been tonight, offering to give up her speaking position and the seconding of a motion. It's appreciated. We'll now move on to the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, and I will call on Colleen Smith, the Executive Director, Mark Steinman, the Chair, and Carlos Robayo, Director of Finance and Administration, to present the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre's proposed 2022 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. Good evening. We are ready to go. So if you could put our slides up, please, that would be much appreciated.
It's just going to be a moment. And that appears to be on the screen, correct?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. So I'm Colleen Smith. I'm the CEO of the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. I am joined today by a board member and the chair of our Finance and Audit Committee, Mark Steinman, and also accompanied by Carlos Robayo, who is our Director of Finance and Administration. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to give you an overview of what's been going on at the PAC over the last little while and give you highlights of what is to come. Also, some information about the pandemic impact of the PAC and our industry, assumptions around our budget for 2022, and of course, a review of the budget itself. I'm going to pass this over at this point in time to Mark Steinman. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Colleen. We continue to be very grateful for the support of the City of St. Catharines throughout the past 12 months. In a year where many of the provincial and federal COVID relief programs were not available to the PAC due to our municipal board status, the city's $1.6 million of support in 2021 has provided the PAC with a base to care for the facility, to maintain an ongoing connection to the community, and to take on a number of organizational developments and projects. In consultation with city staff, our 2022 budget is built around a 2.3% increased request for support. This requested $1,644,837 investment from the city will provide the PAC team the ability and leverage to deliver the first year, the 2022 recovery year, of the 3-year strategic recovery plan of the PAC. Next slide, please.
Thank you. We all recognize that it's been a really tough year for many people in our community, many businesses, from hospitality to social service agencies, to restaurants, etc. But I wanted to just bring your attention to some of the challenges specifically within the area of arts and live performance. So here's a statistic for you relating to GDP for the live performance domain. It's really been a brutal time for us. And according to a recent StatsCan indicator, we are sitting right now at an overall GDP, which is 64% below pre-pandemic levels. So even in the last quarter of 2021, the GDP for the live performance domain was still on the decline. So it's been really tough. And looking at it specifically from the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre's perspective, there's some other statistics I wanted to share too. So in 2020, we lost 67% of our earned revenue. That's our hot ticket programs, our film programs, etc. Also in 2020, we lost 92% of our rental income. Looking forward to 2021, in August of this year, we lost 98% of our earned revenue. And also in August, we lost 63% of our rental income. And as you know, of course, we were completely shuttered between January, really, and July of this year. So it's been a tough go. From a national employment perspective, this is where this particular chart comes in handy. So prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were approximately 73,000 jobs in the live performance domain. And if you see Q2 2021, we're now looking at 36,000 jobs. So basically what we're seeing, 1 in every 2 worker in the live performance domain is no longer working. So that's a pretty significant statistic. Again, looking at the Performing Arts Center, staffing levels in February of 2021, which was really the height of the lockdown for us, saw 86% of our staff laid off. And that doesn't include our IATSE crew members. We have a bank of about 150 employees for which we draw on from IATSE in order to provide backstage services. And we were employing none of those for the first half of this year as well. And also, as we've mentioned, because of our status as a municipal service board, we were ineligible for the emergency wage subsidy and a lot of the other COVID relief programs that were available federally and of course, provincially. And just as an aside, I started my job, as some of you know, in May of 2020. And it was on October 7th of this year, which is the first time I stood in the Algoma lobby with 26 members of my staff together for the very first time. So it's been a tough road, but we're ready to go for 2022. Next slide, please. So despite it all, yes, we've been a very lean team. We've been working really hard to really promote what it is that we exist for. So really, how are we contributing to our community? We've done a lot of work on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Technology innovation is at the top of our minds right now for how we present and stream and produce work going forward. We've done some capital projects, HR initiatives. We maintain our commitment to celebration of nations. We have not let that commitment go, no matter what the state of the world is. I also wanted to say we're really proud that since the pandemic, we have provided $76,000 worth of space, resources, and services to our local arts community without charge. So that's something that the PAC has done in order to help our arts community so that they have a place to perform and that they have an area to congregate and that we support their work. We've been doing hybrid events, as you know, and we've also, as of the end of last year, managed to establish a sustainability reserve that Mark will speak to. And also, we've completed the PAC's first strategic plan. It's actually a 3-year strategic recovery plan, but it provides a really great blueprint for us going forward. Next slide, please.
So another pandemic achievement of the PAC this past year was the completion of our first annual audit as successfully conducted by KPMG. Our first year produced a small surplus, which was transferred to a newly created internal reserve fund, the Sustainability Reserve, which is intended to provide financial stability, including recovery efforts or for extraordinary opportunities as they arise. As we enter the first year of this 3-year strategic recovery plan, the PAC board has approved use of $44,194 of this reserve to support our 2022 recovery activities. Next slide, please.
So these are our 2022 budget assumptions. So like a lot of my colleagues that I've heard speaking tonight, we're assuming that we will have a situation that is somewhat close to what we knew before. So we're assuming full capacity, all venues, and being able to operate all venues simultaneously. Brock University is a huge partner of the PAC. We love our relationship and the fact that we're housing music programs, classes of dramatic arts and film. We're assuming they're back at full capacity and in-person learning in 2022. We assume that artists will be back out on the road again. We're seeing evidence of that now. It's looking promising. And we also are assuming that our audience loyalty returns. So even like transit, you know, looking at how our users responding, how are our audiences responding, it is, people are being cautious, but we are seeing people come back. But we are assuming that that loyalty that we had previously will return. We're also assuming that our local arts groups will be resourced adequately so that they have the money in order to produce the work that they are known to do. Without our local arts organizations and artists, we are in a deficit position. So we look forward to them also receiving the support that they need. Next slide, please. Here's our budget. So this is 2022. This is looking at 2022, similar to 2019, but not quite. So I'm going to highlight some areas of the revenue for you. So we see 53% overall revenue increase over 2021 forecast. This is because we are looking at more activities. We're allowed to have concerts at full capacity. This is great because it provides a really necessary service we feel downtown. It's also great because the more activity we have, the more skip revenue comes through us and into the city to feed back to our local arts organizations. Also, with more activity, we have more events to sponsor. So we have the ability to solicit more sponsorship revenue when we have more activities happening. And I also just wanted to add, our fundraising efforts are also right now aligned with an application for charitable status that we are submitting to the CRA in the early new year, most likely early 2022, the results of which we would see by end of 2022. And achieving charitable status on top of our municipal service board status gives us more eligibility for more funding and just increases our ability to raise funds independently. From an expense highlight, a few things. Our building finance office costs are consistent with minor fluctuations around the increase of activity. We have still a lean staffing model. We're building back up to pre-pandemic levels. Our marketing costs are consistent at approximately 20% of programming and production costs. That's a pretty industry standard number, so we're consistent with that. And also with our 2022 budget, we have some funds that are dedicated to following through on our strategic recovery plan, which includes developing access programs for the public, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and also ongoing rebranding and supplementing of our film program and our hot ticket programs. Next slide, please.
From the board's perspective, we are very pleased with the work of the PAC team over the last year, in particular with the development of the Strategic Recovery Plan, which charts a course of action for the PAC over the next 3 years. This SRP focuses on recovery efforts, as well as on sustainability initiatives and discovery projects. 2022 represents year 1 of this plan, a recovery year that warrants support from our Sustainability Reserve and from the City of St. Catharines. We thank you in advance for your support. Next slide, please.
Like many other performing arts centers across the country, the road to recovery for us is long. In 2022, the PAC will once again be one of the first out of the gate with programming that is engaging, inclusive, affordable, and relevant. Our $5.6 million budget is ambitious, but does serve to support so many others. It supports our local arts community, our downtown businesses, our workforce, and our artists. We all need to get back to business, and we're so ready to go with your help and with your investment. Thanks so much for your time this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions along with my other team members.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Smith, Mr. Steinman, and Mr. Robeo for the presentation. Looking for questions or comments from council. And I have Councillor Phillips, followed by Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Chair. As far as programming is concerned, as you know, the mayor and I were at the Stephen Page Symphony concert the other night that was sold out. It was a great concert, great to see everybody back. As far as the other regular sites are concerned in regards to the Film House and, for instance, the Foster Festival, when will those events be back into full swing?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we have already relaunched the Film House. We have films on, I believe it's Wednesday through Sundays at this moment in time. We have announced some concerts this fall. We are about to announce within the next week the first half of our 2022 programming. So all of those kinds of programs are either being started again or being in the works. In regards to next year, we're working with our partners, the Symphony, of course. We have Yellow Door coming in. We have Bravo Niagara, Carousel we're supporting next year as well with their programs. The Foster Festival has changed their model this year. So they're doing a year-round presentation of a lot of readings and on-site specific performances, like the one that they did this year at the golf courses. So they will not be doing the regular repertory productions in 2022, but the other arts community members that we have, that we've been working with, will be back again.
Thank you. And I know as a board member of the Symphony, we appreciate everything that you've done for us, and we look forward to a very successful season. They've got a great program of music coming up in folk and rock and the Masterworks series. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. And if I can just give a shout out to the Film House. They're showing The Great Escape on November the 11th, and that's a fantastic film, which would be even more fantastic to see in that venue. Also, Wife of a Spy is out next week, and that looks phenomenal as well. Councillor Littleton.
It's just the night. I just can't believe it, but Councillor Sorrento had his hand up before me. He wants to go.
Councillor Sorrento.
No, I defer to Councillor Littleton. You know what? She's very respectful. Go ahead, please, Councillor. Please. Thank you.
Okay, so my question, thank you for the presentation. I just have a question, and I might have missed it. I'm going to just apologize. I'm fighting a little bit of a headache here. There was a negative 44,000 in that last graph. How is that going to get covered?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We were fortunate enough, Councillor Littleton, at the end of 2021, that we had a small surplus, which we created a sustainability reserve. So the sustainability reserve, it's only the 44,000 that we're drawing down on that in order to make our budget break even for next year. We'll do everything we can in order to manage our budget so we can use as little of that as possible. But for the budget presentation purposes, we know that's why the sustainability reserve is there. It's extraordinary projects or extraordinary times. And if this isn't an extraordinary time, I don't know what is. So that's how we're managing the budget for 2022.
Thank you. And my other question is, you mentioned the Foster Festival moving out for the next year. So that would be a potential loss of revenue for the center. Do you think the numbers are, and I'm not being a pessimist here, do you think that they're good? You think you're going to achieve those numbers, or are we being a bit optimistic?
Yeah, the net impact of the Foster Festival not being here in the building does impact us. But at the same time, we have an ability to have now other people in that space should they wish to request it. And we're hopeful that we can be in talks with them again for 2023. So we consider this a 1-year decision. But for the overall budget, we're hopeful. We are planning on robust activity, and we're planning for people to come out and respond to that kind of activity. But I'll tell you, this exercise every month, reconciling, forecasting, reforecasting, the level of detail in our financials right now is incredible. This is a really great team at the PAC. And so here's the thing. If people don't come out the way we expect them to, if artists aren't on tour the way we want them to, we will adjust. So that's how we've managed so far, and we will be ready to do that for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. I know a lot of people are just excited to get back out there. I know myself, I can't wait to go. I have to say the Celebrations of Nations was unbelievable. It was so great just to be back with people in the community. It was fantastic acoustics, all of it, right? Just top notch. So thank you very much, and good luck this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Sorrento.
Through the chair to Director Steinman, you mentioned something about the board transitioning from a municipal service board to another board. When do you see that happening? And how do you think that's going to impact the budget should you transition from one board to the other?
Okay, thank you. We are, and correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen, we are now a municipal service board, correct? So we've made that transition. We have had 1 year. We're in the second year now as being a municipal service board. So I joined the board when it was being reconstituted with my financial background at the time. That was year one back in 2020. And now we're finishing the second year as being a municipal service board. So it's already baked. There's nothing to bake in. Just the board has been reconstituted now with 7 citizen members. It used to have 5. And at the start of 2020, there was 2 new board members, myself and Christina Atkinson, who has an HR background.
Through the chair to Director Steinman, because you are a municipal services board, this has impacted your ability to attain different sources of funding. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll let Colleen explain it, but basically because we get funding from the city where we're not eligible to participate in mainly the federal programs that were available, like SUS as an example. But I'll let Colleen or Carlos Raballo shed some more detail on it.
Sure. I just wanted to make a comparison perhaps to the library. So the library, there's the Libraries Act of Ontario. So under the Libraries Act, they are also able, through that particular membership, to also have nonprofit status. So they are a municipal service board and they have nonprofit status. We only have the MSB right now. So what we're doing is we're putting forward an application to the CRA for charitable status, which is different, but will also render us eligible for more opportunities. That application should be going in early 2022, and the results would be by the end of the year. So we can talk about it next year, Councilor Sorrento, and we'll tell you if we're successful and what that will mean to us, but we're hopeful.
Very good, thank you. And Chair, one more question to CEO Smith. CEO Smith, I believe that once most of the grant has been dispersed, you're left with about 400,000 at the PAC for, I think, just basic upkeep, basic programming. I'm not sure if council knows this, but can you tell us how you leverage that and what the value is on that, please? I think it's pretty important.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We did an exercise shortly after I arrived, to think about what would the worst case scenario be if this building is closed for an entire year. This is it's a gorgeous, very well-built, purpose-built facility. Purpose-built facilities are not cheap, and they're not cheap to run, but they provide a huge amount of value and professional integrity. And so the exercise we did, what would it cost? 12 months, we have 4 people working, and you have a building that you just need to maintain. There are no events. What does that cost? It's approximately $1.2 million. We have sophisticated systems, software. We have 95,000 square feet. So there's a lot to manage here. So approximately 1.2. If our investment from the city is at 1.6, then that leaves us around $4.5, $450,000 to leverage into a $5 million budget. So of course, we also have an agreement with Brock University that sees us being the home to some of their departments. But that aside, the leverage, the ROI that we have on that $450,000 that gets us to a $5 million budget is pretty good, in my opinion.
That's a fantastic return and fantastic effort. I'll just make a couple of comments with permission of the chair. I think we're so blessed to have the PAC, the amount of talent, local, international, Grammy award-winning stars. We're so blessed to have it. I look forward to supporting the request. Thank you. No further questions, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Kushner, followed by Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. My question was very similar, and it's regarding the municipal facility status. Is that the best governance model we have? Because on the one hand, I heard that you are not eligible for one type of financing, but on the other hand, you have advantages in being a municipal facility. So on balance, is that the best model?
Yeah, Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We looked at what the options were. So having the PAC be embedded within the departments of the city is what we started out as. And the city went through a process of determining, okay, what is the next step in this? And this is the next step that was chosen. And it is a fine step. If we weren't in a COVID pandemic, we probably wouldn't be catapulted into the situation that we're in right now. So we're not looking to fundamentally change our relationship with the city. We're only looking to add on to that. And so having an opportunity to add the layer of charitable purpose and charitable intent on top keeps our connection to the city whole, which I feel is very important. And also provides us just with more leverage for independence going forward. So, I mean, we can look back and say, well, could we have done that before? Well, I don't know that we would have understood the need for it before, but we do now. So I still remain grateful for the relationship we have with the city. We just want an extra layer to provide us with more leverage.
Okay, thank you. The programming that you presented combined with a budget increase of 2.3% is very impressive. But I do have one question. Your budget is predicated on Brock returning to full capacity. Is that realistic?
Brock has also been a very good partner to the PAC over the last year. They have maintained their commitment throughout 2021 for support of the relationship agreement we have with them has remained intact is what I'm saying. We anticipate there will be no change to that agreement during 2022, regardless of whether classes have to adjust again or not. We currently have Brock students in our building almost every day right now. So it is looking promising for 2022.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make some comments in my capacity as a board member representing the city. And unfortunately, Councillor Townsend, who is my colleague on that board, could not attend today, but he has been very supportive of the PAC, just like I have. And I'm also on the Audit and Finance Committee, so I work with Mark Steinman, and they've done amazing work to come up with this budget. As Councilor Sorrento mentioned, we're very, very blessed to have such a great facility, and we contribute so much to the community, both into the arts, but also, as I always emphasize, brings large economic benefits to downtown and to the city as a whole. But Councilor Kushner just highlighted that 2.3%, and when I look at the presentations we're getting from the different boards and commissions today, that I believe is the lowest increase of any of these outside boards and commissions, yet the industry is one of the hardest, if not the hardest hit in the country because of the pandemic. So I want to thank again our CEO, Colleen Smith, who, as she pointed out, joined us, and I was on the recruitment committee along with Councilor Townsend again, and she joined us in May of 2020. What a time! Just as the pandemic took off and changed everything, and everything closed down. So in this time, since then, with her leadership and her experience in similar facilities, as well as the work, very hard work of the senior management team, they have done so many things. And I don't want to repeat everything that they have already repeated, but I would just highlight that for the reasons pointed out, they did not qualify for government support, yet they have done so many things, and they have developed this first ever strategic recovery plan, and they have made so many initiatives, including the charitable status that Colleen mentioned, which will not only help us in qualifying for other programs, but it will also help us in our fundraising. So we are very lucky to have him. The city is very lucky to have him, and I strongly support that budget. And I will mention, in terms of events, that this Sunday at 2:30, I believe, the Niagara Jazz Festival has an event, the John Sherwood Trio, which I plan to attend, and I hope that some of my colleagues would attend as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Mayor Sendzik.
Chair, just to follow up on the question that I asked of transit, and I guess this is to Executive Director Smith. In terms of the marketing, and when you look at a budget like this, again, there's been a lack of connection with our own city facilities. So can you commit to working with our city staff to give a presence or a more robust presence to the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre in all of our facilities?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's a great idea. We've initiated regular meetings now with various departments of the city, from facilities to tourism and culture, and those have been going really well on a few co-created events that we're looking at doing around Christmas time. So I'm feeling really positive about the level of interaction we've been having with city lately, and I would be happy to take that forward and look at how we can increase presence for the Performing Arts Centre, because I'll tell you, there's two things we need. We need people to know we're here, and we need people to know how hard it's been, and please buy a ticket. So if there's anything the council can do right now to help us, in addition to approving this budget request, is please just buy a ticket. Come on out, encourage your neighbors, encourage everyone, and working with the city to help promote that too, Mayor Sendzik, I think is a great idea. Thank you.
So I appreciate that, and this was also brought up under the previous executive director and our city staff, so it has to be more than just a hope. And so my expectation is that when I go to the FORPAD, when I go to the library, when I go to a senior center, I'm going to be met with significant marketing for the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. We are now 5 years in plus to this, and we still haven't figured out how to use our own assets to market the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. When I walk into a bathroom at the FORPAD and there's not one piece of advertising on all of its advertising displays that has a First Ontario Performing Arts Centre on it, that is an abject failure of our ability to blend and co-promote something that we all are proud of and that we own. So I know the CAO's on this as well, and this is going to be the last time I actually ask for it politely, because we're failing to use our own resources to drive people to the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. I will just say this, Director Smith, that when you're at the FORPAD and you get probably upwards of 2,000 people through the arena per day, and you wouldn't even know that there was an First Ontario Performing Arts Centre there. You may have one advertising in a corner somewhere, or the advertising is outdated. It was from 3 years ago. You got to do better as a city and as a facility to utilize what we have available for us today. So I'm expecting the next time I make travels around our community to go to the facilities, I'll see much more of a presence for the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. And if someone comes to you and says there's a charge for that, come back to council, because we got to figure this out. There shouldn't be a charge for us to be advertising these venues in our spaces. We got to figure that out, instead of everyone pointing the finger at each other and saying, well, they're charging me for this, so I'm not going to advertise there. We got to stop doing that and figure out how do we maximize the value of our assets. So I'll leave it at there, Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, are there any other questions or comments from members of council? All right, seeing none. I will say again, thank you for the presentation. After the first two presentations, I tried to sing the praises of some things that had been going on, but a number of my colleagues have done that, and specifically Councillor Littleton pointing out the Celebration of Nations, which was, again, a very big success, and it's appreciated on behalf of the community. So with that, can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Garcia, seconder Councillor Phillips. All those in favor of receiving the presentation? And opposed? That is carried unanimously. And can I have a councillor who would like to move the proposed 2022 budget? And I will look to Councillor Garcia, and seconded by Councillor Phillips. All right, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Hardy, yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes.
and Chair Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to item 8.4, Niagara District Airport. I will now call on Dan Pilon, the CEO, and Greg White, the treasurer, to present the Niagara District Airport's proposed 2022 budget.
Mr. Chair, I want to thank council members and staff, Mayor Senzik, for inviting us to present here today. Appreciate the opportunity as always. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank our commission members in attendance. They do spend an enormous amount of time to support the goals of our business and supporting the broader Niagara community. An appreciation additionally of the efforts of Councillor Kevin Townsend, our City Council representative on the Commission, and the wisdom and support of our Board Chair, Ms. Robin Garrett. Additionally, as referenced, we have here today our Treasurer, Mr. Greg White, whose financial guidance has certainly been immeasurable for the airport. I would additionally draw attention to the volunteer efforts of Mr. Mark Steinman, who you've heard from previously here today. So he's certainly going above and beyond the call of volunteerism with his time and effort on our boards. And Mr. Henry Zwolak, who's your additional city representative on the Commission. With that, I recognize that to truly make a point, you have to stop talking before you start listening. Stop listening. So I'll move forward. Next slide. So just to walk you through the outcomes that we hope to achieve in the presentation, I want to make sure that it's laid out before you as we go through some background, some items with respect to the actual industry in terms of how it sits this year, and then go forward with some of the budget information here as well. We're really trying to reinforce certainly how the external environment has affected our business in 2021, how it will impact it in 2022 and beyond, and present you with information for you to be able to make an informed decision with respect to our budget. Next slide. Some simple numbers here in front of you with respect to the asset that is the airport. Most importantly and interestingly at the beginning is the aircraft movements. So to end of 2021, that's an estimate for obviously for the last 2 months. So we're still seeing what would be considered a significant decrease in movements from 2019, where we were at 45,000 movements. We're looking to get close to 30,000 movements this year, which is an increase from 2020, but still a significant ways to go. Additionally, some interesting numbers with respect to the size of the asset that we maintain, utilizing the funds from the municipality. It's certainly a large asset with a number of businesses and individuals and acreage and snow. And disturbingly, for those of you who aren't close to a window, it was hailing outside earlier. So unfortunately, I seem to be the one who has brought the concept of snow in my presentation to roof, but nonetheless, some interesting numbers. Next slide. This is our mission with our vision and value. You've seen this certainly as I've presented to you in previous years. The key, I believe, is the middle portion right there, which is that the goal and the purpose of this facility is to contribute to the economic prosperity of the region by providing that air connectivity and business. So that's what we're looking at to do. And experience has surely taught us that the greater the transportation connectivity that we have, whether that's air, rail, marine, automobile, bus, as you've heard this evening, it's a significant contributing factor to economic prosperity. Next slide. That being said, in a pandemic year, we've certainly had to change and change course as we've moved forward. So we've moved from those areas to pivoting on some of those ideas and issues, and with respect to our capital projects, our rentals of secondary and primary runways. Many of you were probably wondering why there was a photo of cars a few slides ago, and that's a bit of a pivot for us, is that we've engaged in a number of items and events with high-end automotive where they utilize the asphalt to be able to raise revenues for us in that scenario. Our master plan and partnership opportunities, we've innovated in different ways, as I referenced as well. We'll see later on some of the different business areas that we've supported in this year. So we've managed almost all of our training and regulatory requirements in-house, which is certainly a difficult undertaking, but we've done that. And additionally, we've had to prioritize certain items and reducing expenses in some areas, delaying oftentimes planned activities that we were looking for. Next slide. Oh, we can go one back. There we are. So at a high level, in terms of the aviation industry and what we look at from a national perspective, I know as the fourth presenter here today, you're starting to be tired of hearing this from this side. However, when you take a look at it, with the aviation industry, it's been simply calamitous. And this is some of the information that I brought to you last year. You've heard this. It's a song you've heard this evening, and you've certainly sung it at a municipal level as well. Increased operating expenses, decreased operating revenues. The numbers, as you can see right there, are staggering for airports across Canada. $4.5 billion within the last year. So these are all headlines from from your Globe and Mail, from your Star, from various different scenarios in terms of the traffic, the drop in traffic and passengers, and the loss of dollars. So it's been a catastrophic year in the aviation sector. However, and the good news here, next slide, is that when we start to look at a provincial and local area, we'll draw you a couple of numbers and some certainly significantly really beneficial signs that we're starting to see. Temporary suspensions have been lifted, and aviation doesn't really, pardon the pun, fly under the radar when it comes to items and issues that are happening. You see it on the front page of papers, you hear it, and the changes are happening on a rapid basis. But certainly Billy Bishop, John C. Munro, Pearson, they're all starting to see an increase in traffic. Those numbers that you can see in terms of passenger levels are as of last month. So you're seeing about an 80% number for Pearson, but still in the 60s at Hamilton and John C. Munro. The benefit is that some of the federal aid programs have begun to, make their way into the aviation programming that supports, airports, different airlines, all those scenarios. And one of the funding opportunities that's recently been announced was our scheduled service that had been operating here for 3+ years, which was Fly GTA. And they've received, as you can see, $1.8 million in funding and are looking to return to business later on this month. So that's a really positive sign for us as an airport. They had been incredibly successful at our facility, moving from approximately 3,000 packs to 6,000 packs within their 3-year period of time of business. The movements, as you can see at the side on the right, that's our 2021 movements, big drops and then big increases for 2021 over 2022. So that being said, the aforementioned numbers, it's still a drop over where we were in 2019. Next slide. There's the reality from a movements side. That's our last 7 years. As you can see, massive drop with what we saw from local and itinerant. Itinerant is aircraft. They're coming from outside of the community. Those are aircraft that don't begin or end at this airport. So they're coming from somewhere else and landing here. And as you can see, our numbers for 2021 are going to be equivalent to about that first bar graph, which is the 2014 levels. That's where we're going to be sitting for this year. Next slide. From an accomplishment perspective, we did do a feasibility study back in 2020, identified a couple of items and a short-term kind of growth plan and the items that we could be looking at. This is the path that we embarked upon. It talked about ensuring that you completed a master plan, doing some work on your governance and economic impact study, and work on some development items. We certainly continue to have more requests for development than we're able to manage. We continue to get significant asks for building hangars and space, and the issue is that we don't have the ability to develop some of those lands, but we continue to get numerous requests. However, the key business items that we focused on this year were our master plan and the economic impact study, which will be coming to fruition before year end. Our first ever Airports Capital Assistance Program application, and it being successful as well. So there's more about that later when we speak to some of the capital items in front of you. Obviously, and it's a conversation that I'll engage in a little bit later here today. We have some slides, the request for proposals for a third-party operator that is currently underway and that we have embarked upon. So that's a significant amount of work. A governance review is included in part of that. And we've also had some service opportunities that we've engaged in terms of introducing de-icing services and some of the new revenue opportunities that we've got. Next slide. Briefly, I'll touch upon it. Folks, it certainly is an item that folks are aware of. With respect to Great Lakes helicopters, I think the key here is that this is a timely partnership, but it's also one that will time out. The reality is that time is coming fairly shortly in terms of with the reopening of the border. But they are a company that's based out of Waterloo International Airport, however, now leases space here and beneficially is going to continue leasing space to branch out into other forms of operations that they've believed to be beneficial once this business venture has moved forward. So it's been a significant amount of numbers. You can see those are the bar graph below you is your numbers of passengers on a month-by-month basis. And this year, you can see from the numbers right there, a massive surge within the last 6 weeks in terms of what that's looking at. So they'll probably be looking at close to 3,000 passengers that have moved forward. It's certainly taking effect with the loss of revenue with our scheduled service having been suspended. So it's been beneficial from us in that fashion. Next slide. Last master plan was 1992. So it was difficult. We didn't necessarily have the strategy in place in terms of how to grow, and it's certainly difficult to present capital plans to municipal or private partners when you don't have that plan in place. So the master plan really is creating a bit of a realistic path forward for business opportunities. So we're hoping to have it presented before year end. It's looked at a bunch of different opportunities, different ideas. It doesn't present the obvious way of funding all of those items, so it's not the answer to all of our woes. However, it does present some realistic opportunities for us to move forward. It takes a look at, it's a competitive market when it comes to airports out there. And when we take a look at airports such as Simcoe, which is Barrie, and Peterborough, they've added between 300 to 500 jobs at their facilities over the last 10 years. Aviation-related businesses, general maintenance, aviation hangars, hospitality, tourism opportunities, all of those. So our master plan speaks to often many of those items. Next slide. And before we get into the budget items in front of you, the last look back at this year is the RFP for operations that's currently underway. And its current state, it was approved by our 3 municipal partners in 2021. And the good news is that there's significant support for the airport publicly, a recognition of the value of the transportation asset to support the economic growth. And this is about finding partners who have the experience and the capacity to make the capital investments to better engage the businesses of Niagara and beyond. So this isn't a scenario where we're hopeful of identifying interest. That interest certainly exists and the work is underway. You can see some of the dates in front of you. That RFP was released on September 2021, September 1, and is currently active and open. And the submission deadline is November 15th, 2021. Next slide. Key themes for the budget we have in front of us, 3 large ones. It's certainly unpredictable. This is a scenario where there's some volatility in the sector. It's an election year next year, so from a commission perspective, that brings new individuals on board. The outcome of the RFP, there's a lot of items that makes this unpredictable. It is treading water, so this doesn't push us forward, but it doesn't see us falling behind, either, which is probably prudent given the current activities that we have underway. And beneficially, we do believe this budget does lay the groundwork for us to be prepared for some of that growth rather than just sustenance. So that's a good space for us to be. Next slide. Our pressures for this year and going into next year, you'll see some of our numbers, our variance from our actuals to budget in 2021 is mainly some of the legal costs that have been incurred by the airport to support the municipal operations RFP. So there's unbudgeted expenses that came forward after budget had already been approved. And so we'd move forward with some of those items. And so it's certainly been a significant impact on our budget this year. We have personnel and cost increases for 2022 that are included within our budget. We have ongoing increases in expenditures. That's what we referenced, obviously. Cleaning supplies, the mandatory cleaning of terminal happening on a regular basis because the terminal was full with respect to Great Lakes helicopters being here, signage, remote meetings, all of those items that everyone's bringing, onboarding. And additionally, the asset itself, we have some aging infrastructure when it comes to airside lighting, replaced 12 years ago with the last significant grant federally. And the difficulty in the cost to repair some of those items because it's very specialized has come to roost in the last few years with some unbudgeted areas right there. The niche for us is supporting the tourism industry, and it's certainly difficult to grow in a year such as this when that's your niche industry. So next slide is budget. When we see the numbers in front of us right here, so from a general revenue perspective, we're seeing, and I know you have other data that's within your actual packages to provide you a more detailed breakdown in terms of what that looks like. But from a general revenue perspective, we're certainly projecting an increase in what that looks like, a 6.2% increase. So it's cautious. However, based on the information we have at hand, the return to business of our scheduled service provider, industry growth at the moment, we think it's certainly prudent. When we take a look, there's also a resulting increase in expenditures. So moving forward, it's mitigated somewhat. And the operating grant, which is what we request of the municipal partners, the 3 municipal partners, sees an increase of $13,455. That's split between the 3 municipalities, and that's a 2.9% increase. So we're looking at. Next slide. That's the 5-year history of our operating budget and where the revenues come from by source. As you can see, our general revenue and the city of St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and Niagara-on-the-Lake putting forward. And our operating budget last year was about a 4.5% decrease with the budget. And this year, it's simply moving us back up, not quite to 2019 levels, but it's getting us very, very close to where we were. Next slide. That's by municipality, so that you can see the breakdown and quite obviously what the costs and the payments are by municipality. Our operating grant from 2021 versus 2022, our request, and the change. It ends up being a change of approximately $7,500 for the city of St. Catharines, which is a 2.9% increase on that side on the operating grant. Next slide. Increases in the savings. Our operating revenue change, as we see right there. We're budgeting for increased in landing and airport fees, so the fees that every time aircraft's landing and they have passengers on board, all the various different fees, the fueling, all those different fees that we collect here on site. So we're budgeting for an increase in what those look like. We've also had some development that we've chosen not to develop on that we were looking at, and based on where we sit with the master plan. From an expense change, we've seen an increase in personnel costs, a decrease in shared services costs. So we've transitioned our finances that were previously being supported by the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. We've transitioned to them in-house. It's given us a one-time saving, and some other items that are in there that are pushing some of our numbers. That brings us to that 13.4 number. Move forward to our capital budget now. Next slide. And the 5-year history is right there. So our 5-year capital request, as you can see, it's been relatively constant with what our request has been. So it's $325,000 this year, which is a $5,000 increase over last year's request. Next slide. That represents a 1.5% increase over what our request was last year, which is a change of approximately $2,700. So a grand total change, our budget from an actual numbers perspective is a total increase of just over $10,000 from an increase perspective from the city of St. Catharines. When you take a look at capital as well for us, we don't have access to gas tax funding. We are availing ourselves certainly of existing federal grant programs. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So much as all of the partners here online, I think it's important for council to know that we're attempting to move forward with finding many different sources of revenue when where possible. Next slide. The total of our capital budget right there. We break it down into 2 areas. We call it compliance and safety, and those are the issues that are really absolutes for us that we need to support to ensure the compliance and safety of the facility. And the other ones are sustainability, which are perhaps less urgent or not tied to regulatory, but no less needed for the facility. Next slide. These are the items from a compliance and safety side. I won't speak to all of them specifically, other than the ACAP, which is the Airport's Capital Assistance Program. I do have a slide next that speaks to what we're looking at and what we've received there. It's not full 100% funding, given the increase in the cost. The program itself hasn't been able to keep up with the increase in the cost of some of these items. So that's once again something that's been referenced by many folks here today. So that's giving us additional dollars on top of the grant we're receiving. So we're looking to leverage that federal grant to be able to afford what actually is seemingly the first new piece of winter equipment that the airport's purchased in quite some time. Next slide. This is the slide on the airport's capital assistance program. So I do want to give a significant thank you to our federal member of parliament, Chris Biddle, for the support of his office and his efforts to obtain this funding. We're hopeful of future positive announcements to come regarding these additional requests. What you have in front of you is the request that we've made to date. And we've heard with respect to the one request, which was a medium-sized snowblower for the facility, which is a request of $470,000 from a funding perspective. So we're in the midst of procuring that asset and hopefully leveraging that $470,000 to get the additional funding in this year's capital to be able to purchase that. Next slide. Those are the items from the sustainability, significant IT items that we have to look at, maintenance, and then additionally there's a dollar. This is the RFP for operations is really looking for the municipalities are looking to divest themselves of the asset. So there's numerous costs that are not typically borne by the operations of the actual facility as you're looking to identify a new operator. So those are the legal and governance support through to contract award, all of the various different items that are there. We have a staff of only 6, so we don't have certainly the in-house knowledge to be able to support what that looks like on behalf of the municipal partners. So those are some of the dollars that the municipalities are moving forward to be able to support the ongoing RFP from that side. Next slide. And this is the last slide. So the overall number that we're looking at when you put together both our operating and our capital request is harmonized in total of 2.4% increase over our request from an operating perspective from last year. So in the midst of the difficulties and the churn that's existed in the aviation sector, we've certainly worked hard to be able to mitigate what this looks like and bring it back to you at a 2.4% increase. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pilon. Now looking to to council, if there are any questions or comments of members of council. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Pilon. I believe I read in the report that you said that about 50 acres are for sale of the property. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, sir?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I certainly can. There's not 50 acres for sale. The entirety of the property is approximately 362 acres, and it's owned in totality by the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. So the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake owns the entire property, and it's the Airport Commission, which is the 3 municipalities that manages the assets there. What we have is approximately 50 acres that are available for development. So those are available for existing and ongoing developments of hangarage, of take your pick of whatever form of business development that we'd be looking to move forward with.
Oh, thank you for that clarification. I thought maybe they were looking to sell that up, but clearly or not. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you. I thought a statement was made to the effect that you have no ability to finance proposed developments. Did I hear that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, Councillor Kushner, we're in the same boat as a number of the folks that have referenced earlier this evening. We're a municipal services board, so we've run into all of the same roadblocks with respect to accessing any funding for supporting operations in the midst of the pandemic, and we run into the same issues in terms of going out and looking for debenture funding or all those various different items.
Okay, but I thought I also heard you say that Barrie has been very successful in obtaining additional aviation facilities. So what do they do that we don't do?
Through you, Mr. Chair, one of the nuances of airports across Ontario is the governance model that supports all of them. And so they all have very different governance models. We're fairly unique in that we would be the only airport that is managed by 3 separate municipalities. So in the case of Simcoe, as an example, they've recently been onboarded by their district, by the what would be the equivalent of the regional government in our area here. And so they now have one level of government that's investing, and it's enhanced their ability to be able to apply for various different grants and how they can debt finance, because they're no different than if you were a department of a municipality. So there's different means in which ways move forward in that. In Peterborough, in their case, they partnered with Seneca College to bring in their flight school and bring that on board, and all of the investments that come where the educational institutions are able to leverage their ability to get grants to be able to build facilities and all those items. So they additionally have done what we're looking at doing with an RFP, is that the facility is owned by the city of Peterborough, but it's managed by a private sector operator on their behalf. So if we were to pick 10 different airports across Ontario, Councillor Kushner, I would be able to highlight for you that there's probably about 5 or 6 different models in terms of how they're managed, but we certainly are unique, which compared to some of these other municipalities.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Pilon or Mr. White? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Pilon and Mr. White, again for the presentation. Can I have a mover to receive the presentation? Councillor Porter, and seconded Councillor Kushner. All right, thank you. And then can I have a councillor who would like to move the proposed 2022 budget for the Niagara District Airport? Councillor Kushner, and seconded by Mayor Sendzik. All right, are there any final comments or concerns? All right, seeing none, then I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
and Chair Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to the final presentation that is not a presentation of the evening. We're looking at the Meridian Center's 2022 budget, and I will call on Jeff Dixon, the general manager, to present the Meridian Center's proposed 2022 budget. Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Chair Cisco, and thank you, Council Mayor Sendzik, for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Meridian Center. Next slide, please. And you can just go on to the next slide as well. So 2021, obviously, as my peer Colleen at the PAC, briefed you, has been a really difficult year continue to be a difficult year for the live entertainment industry. The Meridian Center's business model is based on people gathering indoors, and due to the pandemic and the required health and safety measures, the venue remained empty for approximately 6 months of 2021. Next slide, please. Without the ability to host indoor gatherings, the loss of these events and in turn revenues were drastic. The additional loss of the revenue, the additional loss to the venue was actually staffing, as both full and part-time employees left for other employment opportunities. Even as the restrictions have eased, as we move through to hopefully the end of this pandemic, the allowable capacities have returned now to 100% capacity. We still see spectator hesitancy has been impacting our scheduled events. Our tenants, the Niagara Ice Dogs, have seen at least a 30% decrease in ticket sales, as well as a 15 to 30% no-show rate on their events. These trends are echoed around the industry and not only impacting ticket sales, but also our ancillary revenues such as food and beverage. Next slide, please. Looking forward though, 2021, we also did see some positives. Though we're not able to control the past, we have been planning for the future. Every opportunity that we were allowed to host events during 2021, we worked with our tenants, promoters, and clients to find the safest way to bring the community back into the arena. We're even planning for an even stronger return in 2022. Next slide, please. Looking at the industry trends, we see that artists want to get back out on the road, and our primary promoters know that the Meridian Center is ready and willing to welcome content back to the building. Though we are concerned with the current spectator hesitancy trend through what we are seeing, though we are seeing a positive response to concerts that are currently on sale. Next slide, please. As we started building the 2022 operating budget, we really had to throw out the 2022 actual and the 2021 budget because they were not weren't a good baseline for us. So we looked back at 2019 budget. What we did was we really did look at what we learned from the pandemic and the related restrictions that were still in place and those challenges that are in front of us. But using our knowledge from those budgets, we really concentrated on 2019 and the budget that we created for 2020, which was our 2019, was the best revenue producing year for us. And that's what we feel the 2022 will be in line with. So we took a very optimistic approach when we created the 2022 budget. Next slide, please. Getting to the budget, our request at the bottom of the line highlighted in gray, the request is for $871,000, $772, excuse me. That includes the fee waiver component for the Canada Summer Games, which will be hosting both a concert in January as well as hosting an event later in the year, obviously the opening ceremonies and basketball tournament. I'd like to draw your attention to the line 2 up before the net income loss from operations, and that number of 634,000 and change. If you take that and look at the 2020 budget that we presented to it, you'll notice that it is a 4.5% decrease in ask from that pre-pandemic budget. This is how optimistic we are looking forward into 2022. We do see strong returns of our of the touring shows, as well as people returning to the building. Next slide, please. Looking at some of the operational highlights when we were building this budget, we do see a total increase of the number of events, specifically concerts. The average attendance will be a little bit lower due to that spectator hesitancy, but we do see it building throughout the year. Net revenues, as it's shown on here, is we're projecting the net revenue per event to be down slightly, primarily due to labor increases that are required. But we're seeing some positives on the ancillary revenues, such as food and beverage spend per person, as well as some of the ticketing service fee revenues that we're able to gain because of negotiations with our primary ticket provider, Ticketmaster, through ASM Global, or corporate offices. Next slide, please. Finally, just some of our challenges and opportunities as we move into 2022. Labor. Labor is our largest problem. We recently, as of yesterday, heard that the minimum wage will be going up. We do not have a impacted number for our building yet, though we're working on that. But we are challenged with attracting and retaining management, supervisory, and part-time casual staff. It's an ongoing concern that we have, and it is industry-wide, and we're looking to ways to retain staff and attract staff to the building. We're fortunate with a number of our full-timers that came back, as well as our part-time staff, which is a huge portion of what we do, but it has been our biggest concern as we move forward, especially as capacities continue to increase. A second, you've heard me say it already, is spectator hesitancy. That hesitancy to return to indoor events, we've seen it already with our primary tenant, the Ice Dogs, and we hope that that ends soon, as there has been a decrease. And we again hear this right across the industry as we talk both in Ontario and across North America. Last thing is ticket sales. They do seem to be last minute, and it does seem to be a high no-show percentage. Though you're gaining on the ticket revenue when people buy it and don't show up, you're losing out on those ancillary revenues such as food and beverage, merchandise purchases that go along with that. Looking into our opportunities as we move forward, the demand for touring is huge. Leveraging our existing and our new promoter relationships is key for us as we move forward, and we've been able to do that through this pandemic. And you'll see throughout the year as we continue to announce shows and events, you'll be impressed with what we have lined up for 2022, provided that the challenges we face are overcome and our promoters are happy to do business and they're able to make money as well. Implementing some of these new industry trends, such as ticketless entries at concerts and additional food and beverage points of sale, really help us generate some additional revenues along the way and some customer service touch points, as well as cultivating alternative streams, building on some revenue streams, building on some non-traditional event success. We were able to have some success with some commercials, trade shows, film productions, and we've maximized our ice rental program now that we are running in the high 90s of available ice time for the community, both as adults and primarily youth organizations being able to use the Meridian Center. But those are some of the challenges and opportunities that we missed. And that ends my presentation. So available for questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dixon. Do any members of council have any questions? I've got Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Dixon, thank you for the presentation. Just trying to understand the numbers. I know you say that there is some hesitancy in attending indoor events and that you have increases in expenses. But when I look at 2019, which is the number you said to compare you to, the net loss line is almost double, from 342 or so to 634 or so in 2022, and that seems a lot higher than what the numbers you show in spectator hesitancy and expense increases would tend to project.
Through you, Chair Cisco, excellent question. That was my misstep. Sorry, I was comparing to the budget 2020 number, but the revenue portion of 2019, that's where we really went after some of the revenue numbers in terms of looking at some of our aggressive nature, and then looking at expenses, what we've been able to learn over the last couple of years, where we've been able to be a little bit leaner as we've been building our expenses, but also some of the areas where we've had to take on additional expenses. And that net event expense, there's a little more expenses related to every event that we do right now. So the net revenue from it is what we are seeing a slight decrease in, which will add to the bottom line expense.
Sorry, thank you. So there were two different years that you were comparing to, I guess. And my second question is, in terms of casual part-time labor, will they be affected by the minimum wage increase?
Absolutely. You know, we run around over 200 part-time staff, even right now, as we are building up. They are primarily part-time wage. Some are at a server's wage as well, so that is also being increased. So there is a definite impact to us. What that number is right now, Councillor, unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me. We are just working on that actually today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Sorrento.
Just one, Chair, through you to Director Dixon. I don't know if you care to comment on it, but you mentioned, Director Dixon, that you're hopeful that the next year's numbers are going to be close to the 2019 numbers. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit, sir?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Cisco. Yes, we do see some positivity. We do see some growth, and we do see the aggressive nature. And as you look deeper into your package of the budget, you'll be able to see that we're being very aggressive with the actual number of events, especially concerts in here. So that's leading us into those 2019 revenue targets. And then just managing the expenses, as I was sharing with Councillor Garcia, is one of the things that we've learned and will need to adjust as we go through this year.
And through the chair to you, Director Dixon, you mentioned something about the ice dogs, and a lot of the people are back. I know I saw Councillor Littleton's Instagram post there when she was at some of the games. Can you just comment on the attendance? I know we hold 5,000. What are you seeing there? Are they 3,000, 3,500?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yeah, their attendance has definitely decreased from normal, and it is a concern to us. It's like a concern to the ownership group of and the Burke family at the Ice Dogs. You know, there is some hesitancy of people returning, even season ticket holders. You know, we've heard from them that they're going to wait a little bit longer, so that does impact them. Though they're buying a ticket to the event, they're not showing up. So, you know, it is definitely a bit lower than what we're seeing, and that is industry wide. As I talk to my venue managers in the OHL, they are all, you know, saying the same thing, down, anywhere from 25 to 30%. Actually, there's, no one that I know of at this point that is up in the OHL. So there is some hesitancy out there. Our corporate office, so that's internationally, primarily in the North America, it is across the board that there is a hesitancy to return, people, if you look at Raptors games or Leafs games, they haven't even sold out games yet. So it is a bit of a concern as we move forward. We hope for 2022, though, we don't see that anymore, and people come out and support the game because it is a very safe environment and very fun environment.
Very good. Thank you, Director Dixon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, Mr. Dixon, thank you for the presentation. Can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Dodge, seconded by Mayor Senzek. All those in favor? All right, so we've received the presentation. And can I get a motion to add that the proposed 2022 budget presented by the Meridian Centre be included in the draft operating budget? I see Councillor Littleton and Councillor Phillips. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, then I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yeah.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Mayor Senzek?
Yes.
And Chair Sisko?
Yes.
That's carried.
All right, so we now move on to item 8.6, which is the draft 2022 capital budget and notice of amendments to be considered. And we do have two delegations regarding the capital budget this evening. So at this time, I will call on Mr. John Koshti to present.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for bearing with us as we went through those presentations this evening.
Not a problem. Hello, councillors. I'm John Koshti, and I live at Berkeley Drive here in St. Catharines. And I'm here to ask the council to budget.
Mr. Koshti, I'm not sure if maybe you're hitting a button on the phone perhaps, but we're getting interference. It sounds like digits being pressed on the phone.
Okay, is that better?
That is, it was, and now it's happening again. All right, so we are back with our live stream now, and Mr. Koshti, go right ahead.
So I'm here to ask for council to have money included in this year's budget to install a playground equipment and a basketball court in Berkeley Park. This is the park that serves an area of the city which has always been a high-density area. It has lots of not only single-family houses, but also semis and a large number of townhousing. But in the past couple of years, the city's approved additional townhousing. Approximately 80 townhouses have been coming online and will be coming online in the future, along with a new street of single-family houses, about 34 of them on the street I live on. And also a 5-story condo coming online probably sometime in the next year or so. This park has not had any upgrades and has not even a basic playground equipment and a basketball court to serve all the families that are going to be living here. The park presently has 3 soccer fields, which are lightly used during the summer months, but it also contains an abandoned tennis court, which looks like it came out of the slums of New York. It's terrible. Basically, other than for grass being cut and garbage pails being dumped, this park has been ignored in many years. Another problem here is with no facilities in the park, people in the area are using the playground equipment and the basketball courts behind E.I. McCully School, which is city property. First of all, the city, the playground equipment here are behind E.I. McCully School is old equipment. I don't even know if it meets the standards that the city sets for its own parks. I've tried to contact the principal, and they basically ignore me, so I didn't get an answer on what their standards are. But other than that, the playground equipment here is used extensively, and actually this is basically trespassing on city property because there's signs posted everywhere. Yet there is no playground in any play equipment in the city park, so it forces people to use the facilities behind the school. The city this year spent $330,000 updating Happy Rolfs, yet a city park that serves so many people and a large population of St. Catharines doesn't even have a basic playground or a basic tennis court. So I'm asking that the city look at this and give us one here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Koshti. I'm just asking staff to clarify, because it was mentioned that people were using the playground equipment at E.I. McCully, and it was mentioned that was, I'm not sure, Mr. Koshti, if you misspoke or maybe you're correct. You mentioned that was city playground. I don't believe it would be. I believe that would be DSBN, which would be why there may be signs up saying that people can't use it. And I just want to make sure we're clear on that there isn't a city playground. To your point, there isn't a city playground in that area that kids would be able to use. Are there any questions?
There's not.
No, go ahead, sir.
There's not a city playground. Yeah. Also, in addition to that, that playground, which is a DSBN playground, you're right, is not available to people during school time because it's school property, and when school is in session, no one can use that anyhow. So there is no playground or park equipment available to anyone in this area at that time.
And that was the point I wanted to make sure was understood, that because it was DSBN and it is DSBN property, that it would be unavailable during school hours specifically. So thank you for that. I have Councillor Littleton, if you have any questions for the presenter, and if anybody else has any questions, please use the raise hand button. Councillor Littleton. Councillor Littleton, I'm not hearing anything, but it looks like you're unmuted, so I'm not sure. Do you want to try unmuting again and see if that works?
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go, you are good.
Okay, I don't know what happened. I don't pretend to understand Zoom.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Koshti. I just have a question for you. Are you aware of the Parks Renewal Plan and the system that staff is using right now?
I'm aware that there is a plan in the system for renewing parks in the city, and as far as Berkeley Park goes, the tennis court is slated for updating within the next 5 years at some point. But there's no plans to install any playground equipment in the park at this time.
Yes, and were you told why? I
understood there was no money.
That's very good. That's nice to cut it to the chase. I guess I know, I saw him earlier. Mr. Lamoth is on the line, but I know we get calls all the time and requests, and I can certainly understand your frustration because we did this year approve an extra $1.5 million into our parks renewal plan. But you're right, it does take some time to get through the long list that we do have, and right now council staff is not building new playgrounds. We're just trying to refurbish and basically save all the ones that we do have. Are you aware of other playgrounds that might be in the vicinity of where you are? Like, do you have young children, neighborhood children?
I have. Well, we don't have any young kids ourselves at this point now. But the only other parks that are available are the Carlton Street and Lake, what do you call that? Cushman Road. There's that one there, but that is in the extreme northeast end of this area. And also, I was told that as far as basketball courts are concerned, there's a basketball court on Roehampton. Well, Roehampton, now, I was there's some sort of an unwritten rule that people who live in St. Catharines should have access to a playground within a 10-minute walking distance of where you live. Now, if you're standing on Bunting at the end of Roehampton, if you hoof it really good, you might be able to make it there in 10 minutes. But if you're anywhere east of Bunting, then you're out of luck for that 10-minute thing. We're looking at mostly younger families with preschool kids. They can only go so far, and I think these other parks are way too far away from where these people are living.
Okay, and just my last question, just to follow up about the 10-minute. Is this something that you read in a document, or is it something that somebody told you about this 10-minute service?
That was somebody, yeah. I forget who it was. It was somebody in the parks. They said this is something that the city strives to attain, but sometimes misses the mark, such as in this case.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for coming tonight and talking to us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Chair Cisco. I know that, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Costi. So, I know that, full disclosure, you are in my ward. I know that we have gone back and forth with some emails. So we happen to have Manager Lamoth with us tonight. So through the chair, I'm going to ask if Manager Lamoth would care to add any clarification or make some comments with regard to Mr. Costi's presentation. And that's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Mr. Lamoth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I think Councillor Littleton provided a fantastic explanation in that staff are following the Parks Renewal Plan as we have presented to the Budget Standing Committee in June of this year, and that we are really focused on renewals. And at this time, no new assets would be added to the complement. Mr. Costi was correct in that the Berkeley Park tennis courts are on the renewal plan for the next 1 to 5 years. And at that time, we'd be looking at a multi-use court. So exploring different ideas with the tennis courts, potentially, basketball, road hockey, things of that nature. And the one thing I would like to bring to Council's attention this evening as well is that at that June meeting, Council did direct staff to pursue potential partnership opportunities with school boards with regards to Parks Renewal Plan. And so I think this EI Macaulay being adjacent to Berkeley Park and the 3 basketball nets and playground facilities that are there really is in the spirit of the motion that was made by Council. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lamoth. Any other questions or comments for the presenter? All right, seeing none. Thank you again, Mr. Costi, for the presentation. Can I have a mover to receive the delegation? Councillor Sorrento, and a seconder, Councillor Porter. All those in favor of receiving the presentation? That is passed unanimously. Again, Mr. Koshi, thank you very much for your comments. I will now call on Chris Richard to present. Mr. Richard.
Good evening, everyone. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak briefly this evening to you. I have to tell you, this is the first one of these budget committee meetings I have attended, and after tonight, I have quite a bit more respect for the role that council and staff do at this time of year. So I am here tonight representing the St. Catharines Tennis Alliance. Our group was founded in the spring of 2021, and in a short time has grown to nearly 100 tennis players within the city. Our purpose is to give voice to the tennis players in the city and to work with the city to turn around what we believe is years of neglect of the city's tennis courts. We want to be partners with the city in refurbishing the city's tennis courts and bringing them up to today's standards, while building a thriving tennis community, which we hope ultimately will lead to the establishment of a community-based tennis club in the city of St. Catharines. That's our aspiration, and while we're anxious to meet all of our goals, we recognize that 20 years of neglect of our tennis facilities can't be corrected in one fiscal year, or frankly, even in a number of fiscal years, especially in an environment where there's many competing interests for scarce municipal dollars, some of which I heard about tonight. In light of that, those realities, I primarily want to thank council and city staff, as well as the Recreation Master Plan Committee, for working with us over the past number of months to start the process of restoring tennis in the city. Months ago, when we formed our alliance, I was kind of concerned that nobody recognized the problem. And what I found over the last number of months in conversations with many of you and with the Recreation Master Plan Committee and with Mr. Lamoth is that there seems to be a real recognition by everyone that the status quo with respect to tennis infrastructure in the city is not acceptable. And I have to say, we're excited about the plans for 2022 to refurbish the courts at Valley View Park and St. Patrick's Park. These are two parks, for those of you that don't know, that are currently completely unplayable for tennis. And refurbishing them is actually going to create some new playing surfaces in the city. And that's going to help us unclog some of our crowded courts. St. Patrick's in particular, we hope that that's going to lead to a competitive tennis program at the St. Catharines Collegiate due to its close proximity to that park, and we think that park could actually be something special and could lead to good things at the school. So it's just a start, but I'm here to say that that's a good start, and we look forward to working with the city in future years. And I just wanted to come here tonight and tell the city that really what we want to do is work with the city in three main ways. First off, when plans are put in place to refurbish courts, we want to be there with the city, having a conversation to make sure they're done in a way that is supported by and in turn supports the tennis playing community. I think that happens in other sports. I think when hockey, baseball, any other of the kind of community sports, when things are happening, stakeholders play a role, and we want tennis to have a seat at the table as well. Unfortunately, an asphalt pad and a net is just not enough today to really support the sport, and we want to be there to give our ideas and thoughts as to if we're going to spend these dollars refurbishing the courts, how best to do it in a way that is going to achieve the goals. Second, we want to work as partners in building the best facilities possible. This means that we want to assist with fundraising for future tennis projects. We want to work cooperatively with the city to apply for Trillium grants for building tennis infrastructure and supporting tennis activities where that's appropriate, both from our perspective and the city's. We're in the process of turning ourselves into a nonprofit so that we're eligible and can work with the city on securing some of that funding. And lastly, what that I think is important, and one of the reasons that I'm here today and promoting this is when the city does support the sport of tennis, as they've begun to do this year, we want to make sure that the tennis community knows about it, so that they can give recognition where it's due, and to be as excited about the future of tennis in St. Catharines as we are. So we view it that we're at the beginning of a journey. And in the coming years, the members of my group and I are going to be continuing to urge both council and staff to keep up the forward momentum. I know we've reached out to a number of you in recent months just to try to put this issue on your radar, and we're going to continue to do that. Hopefully, you don't get sick of hearing from us. We do sense, though, that change is in the air. And there's a recognition that it's time to reinvest in the sport of tennis in the city, not only to restore what's been deteriorated, but also to do things that allow the game to grow and flourish. Of course, I'm biased, but I think it's the best game out there, and I want to see this city do what other areas, other municipalities in the area are doing and support it. And I'm here to say that we're really optimistic that is happening, and we've got nothing but encouragement from the councillors I've talked to, as well as city staff. So for that, my group has asked me to come here tonight and express our gratitude and communicate with staff and council that we really look forward to working with you in the future to keep moving this project forward. So those are my comments, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about tennis, the courts, or anything else from the perspective of my organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Richard, for the presentation. I have a couple of councillors with their hands up already, so I will look to Councillor Williamson, followed by Councillor Littleton. Councillor Williamson?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard, you mentioned that just like a slab of asphalt and throwing some nets up isn't good enough, and I totally agree with that assertion. Have you investigated and have you had discussions with staff in terms what other municipalities and what kind of a surface and what kind of facilities we need? And I mean, keep in mind that they still have to be durable since they will be public or quasi-public courts. Just wonder, like, Realty Park has asphalt with a rubberized surface, I think, on top. There's other courts. Anyway, you know what's out there. The old courts at St. Catharines Tennis Club had, I think, were called a hard, true surface. So I'll leave it. I'll put the ball in your court to answer that question.
Thank you. And the standard that we've been advocating for, and I credit Mr. Lamoth, he's been in regular communication with us on this, is the acrylic surface, similar to what we see at Realty Park. If we look at what other municipalities have done just really within the last year, Niagara Falls has refurbished a number of courts and built a new 4-court acrylic surface court, and actually just Thorold recently at Confederation Park refurbished, and they also went to the acrylic surface. It's a nice smooth surface. It doesn't get pitted the way that just asphalt does. Even if you look at Alex McKenzie Park, which it's quite dated now, it's one of these ones that hasn't been maintained in a long time, but it has the remnants of a acrylic type surface, and you can just see that it's aged so much better. And one of the courts has a lot of cracks in it, which no acrylic surface is going to help that. But the other one, it actually remains quite smooth and quite playable, even though I think that was done something like 20 years ago. And so when we compare that to some of the other courts that we see and just how pitted the asphalt becomes, you know, for the relatively small cost of adding an acrylic surface to a court, you just get years and years and years of more playability from that. And I think that's why we see, you know, all across the province, from small towns to big cities, when they refurbish a court, that's what they're putting in. And it's not just because it looks pretty, it's not just because the tennis players like it, it's because you get more bang for your buck.
Thank you. And pickleball has become also another racket sport. Maybe not competing with tennis, because some tennis players are playing both sports. They can be, you can work the two systems in together on a regular tennis court, more or less.
That's right, and what we have proposed in our conversations with staff is that there be a combination of those. We, of course, as tennis players, we would like a couple of courts within the city that are tennis solely, but certainly if you look at what Niagara Falls has done on their Kaler Road park when they added 4 new courts, they painted on pickleball lines as well as tennis lines. And you know what, the first time you play there, it's a little disorienting, but after a while you get used to it. And so in many facilities around the city, that would be appropriate, as long as, you know, there should be, I think, a few that are primarily tennis, just like there should be some that are primarily pickleball as we look through the city.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Williamson. I have Councillor Littleton, followed by Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of quick comments. Actually, I just wanted to commend Mr. Richard for coming to council. I think that in his presentation, he's mentioned that he and his group have, first of all, they formed together to work together. Then they started using the systems that we have, mainly the Recreation Master Plan Committee, you know, networking with staff, reaching out to counselors. I think this is really a great example of how we can work together. You know, his group is talking about fundraising as well, coming to the table with some willingness to do the hard work, because as you know, in our previous speaker said, well, there's no money. and it's really difficult to always say there's no money. But when you have a willingness from a community group to say, hey, listen, this is really important. We want to be partners at the table with you. I just think that this goes so much further, and it's such a great job that the St. Catharines Tennis Alliance is doing. And so just wanted to commend you and thank you for coming to council tonight to talk about it. And as you know, there are some improvements this year in the budget for courts. So you mentioned Valley View. Absolutely unplayable surface. And so really great news that we're having all this, the extra money that we're putting into the Parks Renewal Plan. But I really just want to thank you for coming and for being partners with the city.
All right.
Thank you. And I'll just make one comment to that if I could. I think my group in particular recognizes that it does have to be a bit of a two-way street, and we have to give as well as receive. So that's why we come, not only with our hand out, but for money from the city, but also reaching out in order to try and help in any way we can.
All right, before we go any further, I know the deputy clerk is probably grinding her teeth because we do actually have a curfew of 9 p.m. and we are just past that. So I'm hoping I can get a motion to extend for another half an hour. I see Councillor Kushner, Councillor Porter, all those in favor? And that is approved. So we have another half an hour to finish up the business. I appreciate that. Thank you kindly. Councillor Phillips, followed by Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Chair. My thought is, if we're going to do this, and I support what you're saying wholeheartedly, is to put a court, a surface with 2 courts with a proper surface on it, one in each ward, to serve the whole community. It might take 2-3 years to do that. Would you agree with that? Would that be a good program?
Absolutely, and in our advocacy with the committee and with staff, we've tried to spread it out over the city. I wouldn't say I would entirely agree with what you say, because we do need a long term. It's not the plan for 2022, but long term, we do need another larger surface, because one of the things we'd like to do in order to build this sport is we'd like to be able to hold things like tournaments and really have a community group. And for that, we need basically another Realty Park. And ideally, if I'm speaking in an ideal world, we would really like a four-court facility that could allow you to have everything at kind of one location. But we've had conversations that you could make it work if even you had kind of two Realty Park type facilities, although Realty is even showing its age these days, that you could, with those two, kind of have a tournament and attract people to the city and run some pretty good events. So while on a pure community level, I agree with you, it needs to be accessible to everybody, and we need to, and I think in the refurbishment plans that I've seen, I think we try to achieve that, although it takes a number of years. But I do think it's important that we also have kind of a number one feature facility, kind of like what Niagara Falls has done with their Kaler Road facility, which, if you haven't seen it, it's absolutely beautiful. And they're installing lights this year, which is kind of exciting for them. So I think if Niagara Falls can do that, so could we. We have the assets to do it.
Yes, I have a facility. It is quite remarkable. But secondly, your group, are there other groups in St. Catharines, tennis groups other than yours that exist?
We created ourselves because there isn't, as far as we're aware. I mean, there are, tennis is kind of a different kind of sport, right? There are lots of individual groups of people that play and kind of grow up and develop with each other through the years. My neighbor runs one as an example, and I play with him sometimes early mornings, very early mornings at Realty Park. And but in terms of this kind of someone looking out purely for the interests of tennis, we're trying to fill a need. That's right.
Okay. And just lastly, just a comment. Years ago, my son took tennis lessons when it was offered by the City of St. Catharines Parks and Recreation Department, and we no longer do that. I would hope that your organization would take the lead in doing that, a way of generating money for your young tennis players, and maybe add to the bank account so we can do more for tennis courts in the city.
Councillor Phillips, give us the facilities, and we would love nothing more than to try and do that.
And adult lessons too, obviously. Okay,
absolutely.
Good luck and full support.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Sorrento.
Sorry, Chair, just a procedural question. We have Manager Lamoth with us right now. I know that Council Richard is presenting. Am I allowed to ask Council Manager Lamoth to weigh in on Council Richard's comments with a couple of questions to him from me to Manager Lamoth? Or is it just straight questions to Council Richard right now?
Sorry, that's my apologies. Everybody makes the mistake of the microphone. If the questions are related to the presentation that we've heard, then that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they are, Chair.
Yeah.
So we do have our manager here, Council Richard. I want to ask him some questions. Manager Lamoth, through you, Chair, to Manager Lamoth. I know that we talked previously a little bit about this special coating or special top, and I think you indicated to me that it costs a lot of money. Do you have a number right off do you have a number that you can tell us in terms of what this will cost? And then I'll just say this, I'm very happy to see that Council Richard and his team are prepared to fundraise. So that's fantastic. So do you have a number for us, Manager Lamoth?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Sorrento, we believe it's about $10,000 per court for the acrylic surface. And so staff's intent would be to try to implement that into the future budgets because we do recognize the need and through conversations with Mr. Richard and the Tennis Alliance and many folks out there in the tennis community are telling us more and more that it is a need out there. And so that is on our work plan to be able to include with future tennis court renewals. And if I may quickly as well, I do want to thank Mr. Richard and the St. Catharines Tennis Alliance as well. We've had some fantastic conversations and we do look forward to the future partnership as well. So.
And through the chair to the manager and or Council Richard, it seems like a nominal amount. So maybe I'll direct this to Council Richard through the chair to you, Council. Would your group be willing to raise $10,000 for one of the courts or several of the courts?
It is one of the things that we have discussed. it's a matter of priorities. So we are. I have had these conversations with Mr. Lamoth and with others in staff and council. There are some other things that we have discussed. One of them is repair of lighting. That's a key thing. And in terms of fundraising efforts, we've had internal discussions within my group that may be a worthwhile place to put our fundraising efforts in order to assist with something that certainly is a big priority for us and is a bit of a struggle for the city. Dealing with your comment that it's a fairly nominal amount and it extends the life of the court, we think that's something that the city should kind of be wanting to do on their own and let us give these extra enhancements that are a bit more of a struggle for the city.
Fair enough. And through the chair, one final question to Manager Lamoth, Chair. So Council Richard has put out on the table, if you will, on the court, if you will, that he would like just some exclusive tennis courts, maybe 2 or 3, whatever it happens to be. I think the master plan is looking at multi-purpose courts like the pickleball, like Councillor Phillips mentioned, right? So would we be able to do this? Just have, say, maybe a couple of tennis courts that are exclusively tennis courts, and maybe pickleball. Does that fit into the plan?
Through the chair to Councillor Sorrento, absolutely. I think we are always looking to make courts multi-use in every situation we can to provide greater community use. But I think in certain circumstances, it certainly warrants just having tennis exclusive. So one of the examples I could provide would be in the Meriton ward. And so if you look at Valley View, that would be the multi-use model for a neighborhood park. But not too far down the road, you'd have Community Park, which I think would be a great opportunity for a tennis-specific location and one that has been traditionally tennis-specific. So I think as staff, we'd love to continue the conversations with Mr. Richard and the Tennis Alliance and the Recreation Master Plan Advisory Committee as well. But I certainly would think that it's open to those types of conversations.
And through the chair, maybe not too far down the road, you might have another one in St. George's Ward, maybe? Just kidding. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation, Council. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Manager Lamoth.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. Are there any other questions or comments for this presenter? All right. Seeing none. Again, Mr. Richard, thank you very much for your presentation. Sincerely appreciated.
Thank you.
And can I have a mover to receive the delegation? All right, I've got Councillor Phillips and a seconder to receive the delegation, Councillor Littleton. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. All right, so we move on to the notice of amendments to the draft 2022 capital budget. As was mentioned at the beginning, we are planning to have the 2022 capital budget considered at or before November 29th. So in order to meet that date, the last meeting to discuss potential amendments to the draft budget would be Monday, November the 8th. That's this upcoming Monday. So as a reminder, council members have been asked to provide notice of their amendments to staff by noon tomorrow. And staff and council have received notice about Councillor Garcia's motion regarding the replacement of Macefield Avenue stairs. So that is already on the record. Do any councillors have any amendments to the draft capital budget that they would like to provide notice of now? And a reminder, if you do have amendments and you don't want to place them up now, you have until noon tomorrow, and we would ask that everybody send those through to Ms. Douglas. All right, so I'm seeing no further amendments at this time. So again, a reminder, potential amendments to the 2022 capital budget must be submitted to Ms. Douglas by noon tomorrow, which is Thursday, November the 4th. We will move on to item 8.7, which is the draft 2022 operating budget. We're planning to have that at council on December the 13th. And to meet that date, the last meeting to discuss potential amendments to the draft operating budget is Monday, November 22nd. Are there any councillors that have amendments to the draft operating budget at this time that they would like to bring forward for consideration on November 17th or 22nd? All right. Again, we do have time still for the operating budget, so if you have amendments, please do forward them on to Ms. Douglas in good time. With respect to motions, there are no motions. With respect to calls for notices of motion, I have nothing that has been submitted to the office of the city clerk. Are there any notices of motions for the next meeting? Nothing, all right. We move on to item 11. There is a report request, and I'm hopeful that we can bring that up on the screen. Not a problem. There is only a single report request. I will say, Council, I think we made very good time as I fill a little bit of space, simply because I believe last year the budget presentations from agencies, boards, and commissions actually spanned across 2 or 3 meetings, and we managed to get everything done in one night. So I appreciate that. And I will say I don't want to have to sing again, so. While we wait for it to come up, I'll just go through the rest of this. The closed session, there is no closed session this evening, so obviously no motion from the closed session. As a reminder to all of my colleagues, we do have our next council budget meeting, which is scheduled for Monday, November the 8th, 2021, which will be at 6 p.m. And there we go, we have it. The staff report back on standardizing the rolling stock purchase policy across departments and the budget ramifications of that standardization. That's a request by me. Would anybody like to second that request? Wonderful, Councillor Kushner, sincerely appreciated. All those in favor? Opposed? And I can't see anybody, so I'm going to assume that was unanimous. Wonderful. With that, we have a motion that there being no further items of business, this meeting be adjourned. Can I have a mover? Councillor Porter, and a seconder, Councillor Williamson. All those in favor? Good night now.